You're tuned in to HorrorSlop, where the stories are rotting, truth is twisted, and sleep, forget about it.
Yeah, welcome to the pit. It's gross, it's creepy, and honestly, it's kind of my vibe. Hope you like nightmares, because tonight's tale, it slithers.
Straight from the darkest corners of Reddit. Real stories, real fear, and just enough blood to stain your soul.
So at least grab your bed sheets, so grab a flashlight, and maybe a therapist.
This is HorrorSlop. Every night starts somewhere, and this is where yours begins. First story, first chill. Let's see if you make it to the end.
/ Listen, Tim, I'm waiting on you, he replied in a low, raspy voice. I marched forward. My right foot got caught on a ripple in the Persian rug that covered the floor and I stumbled, bracing myself on the man's desk as I fell by wrapping my fingers around its blunt edge. I retracted my hand in disgust and started shaking it. The surface was slick with something gelatinous. What the hell is on my hand? I barked. No idea. He replied. The chuckle transitioned to full-on cackling. His cheeks became flushed from the elation, his breathing strained. I began pulling my hand away, but he yanked my palm back to his face with enough force that I needed to anchor my other hand onto the desk to avoid toppling over. His cackling fizzled as he inspected the substance. He brought my palm closer. When it was an inch from his nostrils, he began cartoonishly sniffing the viscous fluid, even going so far as to dab some of it over the bridge of his nose like it was sunscreen. Well, Tim, if I had to make a wager, I'd say diesel. I snapped out of it and jerked my hand from his grip, lurching backwards to create some distance between me and the lunatic. I dragged both hands along my thighs, desperate to get the liquid off, but nothing seemed to smear over my chinos. I stared at my hand. Flipped it over and then back again, disbelief trickling through my veins like an foredrip. He didn't answer me. When I looked up, the man had his head down, listlessly attending to the stack of documents on his desk, yawning as he scanned paper after paper. He'd gone from feverish cackling to utter indifference in the span of a few seconds. My brain throbbed from the whiplash. Why am I here? I thought. The man said. Why am I here? I repeated out loud. Oh, come now Tim, you know, he replied, monotone and disinterested. I started hyperventilating. No need to fall victim to hysterics, my boy. Take a moment. You'll realize that you're exactly where you're supposed to be. In the meantime, can I offer you some refreshments? He slid his chair backwards and bent over, rummaging under his desk. Then, I heard the rapid clinking sound of many hard pellets cascading against plastic, followed by the gurgling of water being poured into a glass. When he reappeared, the man had one arm wrapped around a massive, semi-transparent bowl of mint Tic Tacs and a bright orange sippy cup in his other hand. Although, I wouldn't say they'll make this painless. Painless really isn't the right word, even if it sounds right to you. Easier is close, but it's also not quite right. Simple, merciful, streamlined, humane, they're all close, too, but each one is just a bit off the mark. Language is funny like that, huh? So many words, and yet none of them are ever a perfect fit, not a single entry in the whole damn catalog. Aren't we the ones who came up with the words to begin with? Thousands and thousands of years evolving, expanding, inventing, and yet, we haven't even come up with the right words to explain ourselves and our motivations. You'd think humanity would have had the entire spectrum of experience completely mapped out by now. Dismal, absolutely dismal. I mean, what good is a self-driving car or an intercontinental missile system that can accurately target and obliterate something as insignificant as a gnat, from 4,000 miles away, mind you, if we haven't even developed enough language to adequately describe why we'd want to do such a thing in the first place? It's a little ass backwards. We're building lavish mansions on a foundation made of driftwood and Elmer's glue, so to speak. That brass doorknob shone with a dark red-orange glow. The man closed his eyes and massaged his temples. "All right, Tim, settle down now," he said with resignation. He smiled, lips curling into an enthusiastic half-crescent. "Well, please correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe that you just threatened me. In essence, I'm only reciprocating the gesture. Tit for tat, turnabout is fair play, etc., etc. You get the idea." His eyes widened. His smile became even more animated, eventually appearing more like a painful muscle spasm than a grin. "See you when I see you, Tim. Where the fuck am I? What was I doing before this? How did I get here? Why am I here?" I let those questions echo around my head, undisturbed, unanswered. Dissecting them felt futile. In the end, the best course of action seemed to be the most straightforward one. I picked up speed. My sneakers splashed in and out of puddles of what I supposed was water from leaky plumbing. 30 or so footfalls later, I was in front of another door. Hesitantly, I grasped the knob, turned it, and slammed my shoulder against the wood, pushing it open. His pinstripe suit was a little brighter, more azure than navy. The previous rug's pattern was primarily floral, this one depicted a flock of birds flying over a snowy mountaintop. The boxes of papers beside the desk were dappled with moisture, sodden and crumpling, whereas the other ones had been bone dry. He didn't respond to my intrusion. Didn't seem bothered in the least. No, he just kept working. The next door creaked open, and I prayed for something different. A lobby. A flight of stairs. The goddamned black pits of hell would have been preferable to another Xerox of that office. The room I discovered was like the room before it, but with its own trivial changes. Once again, no luck. The man behind the desk was wearing a crimson polo and brown khakis. I heard him cheerfully whistling the Talking Heads Burning Down the House as I passed by, once again taking the left door. Then straight in the room that followed. Then straight for a few instances, followed by left for a few instances. After that, I began alternating. Left. Passageway. As I progressed deeper into the labyrinth, things began to change. In the first room, the Persian rug was floral. In the second, it had a flock of birds on it. In the 40th, a pelt made from my mother's flayed skin replaced the rug. Her head was still attached, facing me as I entered the room. Two dead eyes tracked me as I ran, a pool of spittle forming around her gaping mouth, putrid saliva streaming over her pus-stained gums. How about another example? Why not, right? The rule of threes is narrative gospel, so allow me to provide a third and final example. I scrambled across the room on all fours, squashing several insects in my wake. When I got as far as I could away from the window, I shifted myself towards the wall, and I laid down. Eventually, the tears stopped flowing. I closed my eyes, and I waited for sleep to take me away. I waited, and I waited, and I waited. Am I dead? I whispered, still facing the wall, not expecting a response. I heard a rustling across the room. Then, the soft tapping of feet against the floor. The sound kept getting louder. He was approaching me from behind. I felt the vibrations of his footsteps. The tapping stopped. He bent down, and the floorboards whined. Termites sprinkled over me like raindrops. Oh, Tim, no, you're not dead. I mean, think about what you've done. Consider the magnitude of your depravity. The profound extent of your sordid nature. Do you really think you've earned the luxury of death? I didn't dare look. I stayed still. Pretended I was dead. Figured I'd pretend until it finally came true. I was exactly where I deserved to be. The cycle had 3 steps. The problem was I did not know how to backtrack. I'd gotten myself hopelessly lost, and I couldn't figure how to orient myself to the labyrinth. Initially, I assumed I would eventually find the original office if I just kept moving. There could only be so many rooms, right? I was going to get lucky at some point. After the search broke me, I'd become dormant. I'd curl up in a ball, close my eyes, and pray for sleep. Then I'd pray for death. Then I'd review the events of that first encounter, the slick grease on my fingertips, the tic-tacs, the glowing knob, all of it. That review was usually enough to plunge me into a state of pure self-hatred. Why did I run from him? Why didn't I just listen? What the fuck is wrong with me? That would last for what felt like a few days. Eventually, though, the cycle would become agitated with my dormancy, so it would send him to find me. I'd spring to my feet, and I'd run. I'd just be trying to get away from him. Naturally, that meant I was required to begin again. I tried mental maps. I attempted to find meaningful patterns in the office layouts, eyes pressed against the fabric of various Persian rugs, scanning for symbols that could be interpreted as arrows meant to point me in the right direction. I beat the shit out of a fair number of office men, screaming and crying and begging them to just tell me what to do. They'd smile at me, and when they became bored with the outburst, they'd reach to open the window blinds, and I'd run away. Each time they threatened to show me what was behind it, though, I'd stay for just a little longer. I'd bolt from the room a little slower. That's when I began to smell something in the air. Not the scent of a raging fire. No, it was the step before that. The odor was more acrid. More chemical in nature. It stung my nostrils, and I knew there was truth lurking behind it. Something genuinely evil was grafted onto its carbon. Diesel. The smell of gasoline offered to act as my North Star, and I let it guide me home. Backslash. The glowing brass doorknob. I raced across the rug to the opposite side of the room. My hand shot out to grasp the handle. "I'm not sure you're ready to do that," he cooed, still not looking up from his work. I didn't listen. My palm folded around the knob. The agony died down. My scream petered out into a low whimper. I brought what I assumed to be the ruins of my palm into view. I couldn't smell blackened flesh anymore. I could smell only gasoline. "Take a seat. Settle. Get comfy. I'll give you some privacy. Have a peek behind the curtain, and then you should be good to go. No hard feelings about all this, I hope." I looked away from my hand, and the man was gone. He hadn't disappeared through one of the passageways. He simply vanished from sight. I sat down, leaned back, and tugged on the drawstring, removing the blinds. Backslash. I looked nervous. My hands were trembling as I unscrewed the lid of an orange sippy cup. The doorbell rang. I called out to whoever was there. 1 second. A minute later, I paced into the kitchen with a young woman in tow. I was rushing around and giving her directions. A dull red canister dripped a tiny puddle of gasoline against the wood paneling. I lit a cigarette, but I didn't smoke it. I dropped the ember onto the diesel, turned around, and I walked away. One box of documents spontaneously toppled over. Papers leaked onto the floor and glided towards my feet. I picked one up and flipped it over. The language was no longer unintelligible. Words like policy holder and death benefits practically leapt from the page. The door with the glowing knob creaked open. As it did, I heard him. The sounds of shrieking steel and a ruinous childbirth seemed to shake the office walls. I stepped into the passageway and closed the door behind me. My eyes gradually opened. As my vision adjusted, I heard an older man's voice. His speech was garbled at first, but it eventually became clear. And that's unfortunately a difficult problem to remedy. Our prison system is wildly inefficient. We're running out of available space to house felons. Not only that, but it's expensive as all get out, and the recidivism rate remains unacceptably high. So, to be clear, what we're doing isn't working, and it's costing us a fortune. I attempted to speak, but I couldn't force any words to spill over my cracked lips. The throbbing in my head intensified. Sure, it's new, and undeniably expensive, but think of it this way, in order to enact his punishment, we only needed this small space for 7 short days, as opposed to a cell for the remainder of his life, however long that'd end up being. The initial overhead may be high, but the long-term savings could be truly incredible. Not only that, but we subject our volunteer prisoners to a specialized neurotechnical module while they serve their sentence, which has shown to decrease reoffenses from a projected 45% to around 2%. Even without the suit, I'd recognize his face anywhere. I nodded.
You're still tuned to HorrorSlop. Frequency unknown. Stories endless. Let's spin the next nightmare.
It was a foreclosure, 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, broken porch light. My mom called it a fresh start. I was 13. Too old to believe in monsters. Too young to know some monsters were your face. We unpacked in silence. Still grieving. Still trying not to say my little brother's name. Josh had been dead for 6 months. Drowned in the neighbor's pool while I was supposed to be watching him. I didn't cry at the funeral. I haven't cried since. But when I first saw the attic window, I swear to God. He was waving at me. The attic had no stairs, just one of those fold-down ladders. We never opened it. There was no reason to. But every night, around 2:15 a.m., I'd hear footsteps above my ceiling. Light ones. Running. Like a child playing tag. I told myself it was rats. Or the house settling. I told myself that every night for a week. She just said, "Don't go into the attic." I hadn't told her it came from the attic. The noises got louder. Dragging sounds. Breathing. Whispers that didn't feel like they came through ears, but through skin. Then, the laughter started. Not mean. Not evil. Childish. Innocent.
Still here? Aw, look at you. Brave little meatbag. Too late to back down now. Next story's already watching.
My husband brought home a fake daughter, by life estrangement too. This is not my child. That was all I could think. "Honey," said my husband. "Is everything all right?" My husband gave me a worried look, and the girl who was not Liza looked positively terrified. Why was he evading my question? Why couldn't he just answer? I took a deep breath, tried to remain calm. "Go on upstairs, honey," he said. Mommy's not feeling well. I waved my hand in a dismissive gesture. I don't need them, I said. They make my mind all fuzzy. The anger on my husband's face became less restrained. Well-etched frown lines beneath his lips deepened. Do you remember what happened the last time you said that? He asked. I felt the floor tilt beneath me, and before I knew what had happened, I found myself falling backwards into my husband's arms. Hot tears were streaming down my cheeks, and my body convulsed with violent sobs. My husband gently brushed my hair and whispered in my ear. Soon my mind was going fuzzy. I could feel myself becoming a pliable zombie that could be told anything, made to do anything. Of course I knew that it was wrong, that girl was not Liza. I knew that it wasn't me who had been driven insane by our daughter's death, but my husband. I knew he had kidnapped that girl when she was a toddler, and brainwashed her into believing she was Liza. But, most importantly, I knew that if I didn't take my pills, if I shattered his precariously built illusion, that he would kill the girl and start all over again. Just like he did the last time.
Anyway, let's lighten the mood with something fun, and... Nah, just kidding. It gets worse. Hit it.
But I went too far in my pursuit of greatness this time. I was always fascinated by the world of science. Even when I was a little kid, it always stood out to me more than other subjects. In addition to cell study, I thoroughly researched all sorts of animals as to get an idea of what their biology was like. My sophomore year of high school, our science teacher, Mr. Rourke, told us that we were to do an experiment for our final. The only requirement. During this time, I had fallen slightly more in line with animal biology as it helped to have an idea of how the entire body of something worked. I settled on the planaria, a carnivorous flatworm known most for their regeneration. I had found the subject of my project. Since you can't really do something for the whole day during school, I waited for the weekend to try and catch my little worm friends. I figured I'd wait a day before going back and checking. Having placed the traps in the water on Saturday, I chose to check them on Sunday. To my complete and utter astonishment, I had actually been successful in my endeavors. It wasn't much, but I managed to catch 3. For the contents of my project, it was going to work. Oh, I guess I forgot to mention just what my intentions for this project was. I cut the worm in half, and began a recording. A time lapse, of course. The second worm was going to have to endure a bit more. For the last one, I had a bit of trouble figuring out what to do with it. There, I found a bottle of hydrochloric acid. I got an idea, a terrible, terrible idea. Only a little bit. I told myself as I reached for it. Only a little bit. I won't kill it. Mr. Rourke had given us 3 weeks to finish the final, so all I had to do was gather my recordings, make a document listing everything I studied and hopefully get at least an A on this thing. I was one of the only students not doing anything at their desk in the class, so I wasn't too surprised when Mr. Rourke called me up to the front. I obliged and went up to his desk. Hey, you called me up. Is something wrong? I won't say too much, but I'm experimenting with just how much an organism can take before it gives out. Jesus, like, actual animals. No, just worms. Okay. Well, I hope you know what you're doing. Playing God doesn't always work out. Ah. I replied. Don't think I'm playing God, I'm just seeing how things work, I'm experimenting. And then, 2 weeks after I mutilated the 3 worms, I checked the results. To my complete astonishment, it had regenerated itself and essentially created a new worm. I was elated. Despite the complete crushing of it, this little worm also managed to regenerate. Amazing. I'll spare you the details, but even the acid worm regenerated. I was absolutely floored. My experiment had worked, and I caught it all on tape. Mr. Rourke came to me after the final class and requested a one-on-one. Raymond. You know I don't pick favorites. But I have to say, I think that may have been my favorite project any student has done. Ah, thanks Mr. Rourke. It was quite interesting. I think I want to do more research in this field, it's fascinating stuff. Be careful when you play God, you never know what could go wrong. And that was the last I saw of him. You probably know the rest. And then I met Andrea. I was about to tell him that I saw a future in his eyes when she ran into me by accident. That was when we stopped. There, for a moment, it was just the two of us. No, look! She exclaimed. I spilled something on your shirt. Oh no, really, it's fine. I responded. Life only proceeded to get better from there on out. I proposed, we got married, bought a house, a dog, all that stuff. It was wonderful, and all at the same time, I was still able to forward my career. Raymond Fair, brilliant cytologist, known for, yeah. 2 lines. We were going to be parents. On February 23 RD, Thomas Fair was born. I finally finished the first prototype of the planet drug, nearly 12 years after I first started developing it. Playing God doesn't always work out. For a time, at least. It was during the afternoon that I got the call. In the hour that I was there, my life as I knew it ended. Instantly, all of what I had worked for in my life was taken away so easily. The authorities said there was no chance of them living and that I should start sorting their stuff out. I wasn't ready to give up so easily. I'm ashamed that I did it, but hours after their passing, I broke into the morgue they were being held in. Desperate times call for desperate measures. I couldn't bear to think of life without them. I had only one thought in my head for the entirety of the drive home. As soon as I hit the driveway, I was out of the car and dragging the corpses into the house. They were coming back, they had to. I wasn't sure if I could handle things without them. Plan a drug. Playing God doesn't always work out. I couldn't listen to my thoughts. Playing God doesn't always work out. Decisions of a madman or desperate choices made by a grieving, used-to-be father and husband. I was walking the line, but I was also dangerously close to falling in on both sides. I'm doing better, now. I responded before kissing her. The planarian DNA had repaired them. And it did one day when I found my son, sitting in front of the open fridge door, gnawing on a raw chicken that was supposed to be for dinner. I suppose I should have suspected something, but Tommy was a growing boy. We ate something else. The days went on. It was jarring when I caught both of them eating. The last experience with my son is what nearly sent me over the edge. I came up from the basement one day to a horrifying scene. I lectured him on why he shouldn't do that and asked where his mother was. Eating the meatballs. She had been eating the meat for the dinner we were going to have that night. I felt like I was losing it, but I tried to stay positive about this. They just needed to get used to their new lives and eventually, everything would be okay. I shouldn't have ignored the signs. They ended up clearing out nearly the whole fridge before going to bed. I had to do something in the basement. I was going to study just what was causing them to act like such animals. As I set up the microscope, I could hear noises upstairs. I wasn't able to get a good look at the Plana sample. I heard the basement door open. Dad. I looked up the stairs and there they were, crouching and looking at me. "What's wrong with you guys?" I yelled. "Why are you so hungry?" My wife was the one to respond. I was exasperated. What the hell was happening? My wife, with a hungry look in her eyes, grabbed Tommy's hand and responded. "We want to eat you, we're so hungry." That's where I am now, waiting and typing this. I think the worm DNA spliced with theirs and created something entirely different. I don't think that's my wife and son anymore. Please, for your sake, don't make the same mistakes I did. And it didn't work out.
Sleeping yet? Didn't think so. Next story's up. And yeah, it's worse. You're welcome.
The previous tenant of my new flat left a survival guide. I might need some help, by Nutatown JM. When I finally caught up with Mrs. Hemmings herself, I thought about Natalia and the cult. About the kids and their nighttime antics. About the committee meeting. Jamie and how much I missed him, Georgia and my burning guilt and Mr. Prentice, who was finally making those aforementioned animal noises. I didn't get to stew for too long, I had to get ready for the committee meeting. After the events of the night before and my growing mistrust of Prudence, it was imperative that I got the neighbors on side if I was going to achieve anything like my goals of eradicating the imposter/cultist neighbors. "I'm glad you came," Terry said to me, loud enough to hear over the voices of the other neighbors. "I really want you to see the good side of the block. We don't bite really." She laughed nervously as she realized the irony of her statement. "Terry, I need help, we need to stop those people from coming back again and from terrorizing people. The block can't go on like this." I wanted to make the purpose of my attendance clear to her, it was time for things to change. "But if you don't let them in then they don't bother you. I've spoken to the kids, they know not to do it again, that those people are dangerous." She paused for a moment and sighed. Although them running away didn't help, the kids think they're indestructible now. They've been telling me all morning that they're going to kill the bad guys. Any other business felt a bit lackluster, but it would do. As long as it got discussed. I turned my attention to the piece of paper, it was the agenda for the meeting. For something written so formally it appeared farcical. It seemed other flats and floors had different but equally strange issues to mine. There were only 6 items on the agenda for the meeting with AOB as the 7th. They were as follows. 1. Welcome and introductions with apologies for absence. 5. The stairs with no grip leading up to floor 14 at the very top and the health and safety hazards this presents. She reminded me of a very strict, disciplinarian school teacher I had worked with during my university placement. She commanded quiet in the room. "Stand up, dear, introduce yourself. We're pleased to have you here." Hi. My name is Kat. I live in flat number 42, I moved in with my boyfriend Jamie but he was killed in the lift by the weird rat creatures you people have living here. The people that claim to live in the burned out flats won't leave me alone and one in particular seems to want me dead. Oh, and that window cleaner outside my flat makes me want to scoop my own eyes out with a spoon every time he knocks on the door. Nice to meet you all. The crowd had gasped a little. She had been in positions of power in her life for certain. She responded professionally but coldly. There was no feeling in her condolences. She came off like a corrupt politician digging themselves out of a hole. She did decide to skip the introductions after my outburst. She carried on with the proceedings pretty swiftly, and interesting characters present at the meeting started to emerge. She got up and lifted her shirt to reveal a large deep bite mark across her stomach caused by her dog after a long episode of the lights flickering. When that didn't change Molly's answer, she lifted her trouser leg to reveal a smaller, but still noteworthy bite mark on her leg, from her elderly mother who lives with her. Molly didn't budge. "Catherine, what can we help you with, dear?" she asked in a patronizing tone. "I want help in getting rid of the people pretending to be from the burned-out flats. I can't be the only person that doesn't like living in fear," I stated boldly, trying not to break down again. A few people called out in agreement with me from the crowd. The only one who has ever been able to deal with them is Prudence. And that difficult woman never revealed her methods. Don't think we didn't try. You're suggesting a suicide mission. You do well to remember you are new here. Molly hissed through her teeth. Where she came forward, a few others followed. Soon I had 5 people plus myself willing to form a subcommittee to get rid of the cultists. Molly didn't like it, but she agreed to let us do it. There was me, Precious, and Terry, along with a lady named Shanti who lived a few doors from me. A man named Anton and his friend Leo from floor 8 made up the group. To be honest, they just seemed keen to get involved with any kind of battle. Leo was the loud one, Anton was mostly silent. Derek would have helped us. He was a great man. He used to turn up at my door in the dead of the night just as those lights started and take my dog for a walk. She spoke of the gardener with a fondness. It was awful when he left. That woman that used to live here was nasty to him. I watched out my window as she tore up the garden. I know she was grieving for that little girl, but I know Derek only ever wanted to help. Shanti spoke up from the corner. She had been pretty quiet the whole time. He was the whole reason we don't have those awful creatures from the lift all over our homes anymore. My brother was killed by one before the agreement. He was 4 years old. This is another thing I don't understand. Why have any agreement? If you manage to kill most of them, why not all? I asked, feeling anger over Jamie burn through my throat as I spoke. When Prudence and some of the others killed the creatures, they killed a large group of them in one hit. They had started to work out that food scraps and pet food were attracting them, and they gathered all the pet food in the tower block into one empty flat on the floor the fire had happened. The creatures came in droves just like expected, and they set the flat alight. Again. There was only 3 of them, but they learned to sneak attack. More people died than during the original infestation. They were more intelligent, but not in the way it comes across when the agreement's spoken about. We couldn't speak to or reason with them. There are only 2 left now. Prudence killed the other during what happened with her granddaughter. But that only made them 2 stronger. Like they absorbed the third. I tried to take in all the information I was receiving, but I couldn't. It was too much. Derek isn't coming back, it's been years, this is pointless. Terry finally erupted. Precious laughed again. I don't speak to her all the time. We just keep in contact, she was always nice to me. Terry tried weakly to defend herself. I know she spoke to Prue, but I was certain that it really was entirely innocent. I felt totally alone. I couldn't trust Prue or Ian or pretty much anything I thought I knew. Maybe Prue didn't even kill those neighbors. They only told me half-truths about the creatures after all. I was left alone with my thoughts again. And after a few hours, a good one finally struck me. but I needed supplies. I left the building and went to the nearest shop to gather the items I needed. For what I needed and the time of night I had to travel to a 24-hour supermarket. It took half-hour each way on the bus. But I stayed focused. My bags were heavy and awkward on the way back to the block, but if it paid off, this was going to be worth it. I trudged up the stairs. It took me 2 trips and 24 flights of stairs instead of 14 to get everything in my flat and organize myself. It only took 16 and a large gym bag that was much easier to carry on the way back down, thankfully. The door at the back led to a small concrete area with a grass strip along the side and a bench decorated with a memorial plaque. This was the block's outside space. As is typical in the city, the whole bench was covered in graffiti. The memorial was unreadable. I got to work. I dug the strip of grass, turning soil with my new equipment. I had never been green-fingered, and to be honest, the shrubs I had bought had been so heavy I had grown to resent them a little. I worked for an hour and a half. I was sweating and night had come. It was pitch black and I was using my phone torch to see. I hadn't seen him arrive, but the man was already sat there. He wore a flat cap and a jacket, despite it being the middle of summer and a beautiful night. He just smiled warmly at the shrubs for a moment without a word. Eventually he spoke.
Hey, you feel that? That weird pressure in the room? Yeah, that's the algorithm. It knows you're watching, and it gets real cranky when you don't feed it. A simple ritual helps. Click the little thumbs up, tap subscribe, say its name 3 times into your phone mic. Kidding, probably.
Engagement appeases the darkness. You know what to do.
Good, human. Now, back to the horror.
A little background first. I was serving a 15-year sentence in a penitentiary in southern Arizona. What I was in there for isn't important. During my stay there were countless things that happened that no one could explain, and even more that no one wanted to know more about. Now, apparently, skinwalkers are tricky to point out on the spot, but if you manage to survive around one for more than a minute or two, almost everyone can tell the mannerisms are all off. They can mimic human speech but not replicate it. They twitch manically. They have an unnatural gait while walking. But apparently they got better with experience. The old Navajo guy, his name was Carl, said that he was sure there was an actual one among the prisoners. Slowly picking us off over the years. He called it the Grandmaster Skinwalker at one point. Apparently he thought it had human mannerisms down so well that you might not even be able to tell if it was your cellmate for a day or two. It had to be good, he posited one night. He would expect a skinwalker to jump at any opportunity for a kill. But this one realized it had a revolving door of people to kill coming to it, and masterfully bided its time, as Carl thought, for years. A lot of guys found humor in it. A lot more were really on edge about it. Every once in a while in prison, people snap. Sometimes you'll find your cellmate swinging in front of your bunk, strung up around the neck by his pant leg. Sometimes you just can't take it anymore. But in our yard, people tended to snap in a very special way. It wouldn't be an outburst at dinner, or a silent suicide in the night. Guys would just stop talking. Hunch over and shuffle around. Any friendships they had would be mostly out the window. They would turn into a loner during rec time. They would let their hair hang in front of their face. No one liked to talk about it. Like if they did, it would happen to them next. I felt the same way. I didn't know if it was a skinwalker, or just people going crazy. But I didn't want to find out. It wasn't clockwork or anything, but every time someone snapped in this way, it wasn't more than a couple weeks before they were shipped off or transferred to God knows where without anyone else knowing beforehand. I was released from that place about a month ago, and I have more stories than I can count. I swear it was nearly my turn. About a week before I was discharged, my cellmate, and a good friend of mine, snapped. In the same kinda way. I didn't sleep for an entire week. Well, I did sleep of course, but never for more than a few minutes at a time. Never turned my back on the guy. The scariest thing? I woke up one night to him somehow snaking his body through the bars of our cell. For reference, I couldn't get anything past my shoulder through them. The worst part though, he was coming back into our cell. On the day of my release I didn't say a word to him. Just left. He seemed fine with it, so was I. I had made it through 15 years of prison fights, gang disputes, and for all I know, skinwalker abductions. I left through the front gates, a free man. As I walked along the fence for the rec yard, I spotted my cellmate, standing off on his own, like he had for the last week or so. I shook my head, not even really sure if it was him anymore. I took one last look over the yard, this time from the other side of the fence. I wish I hadn't.
Alright, quick break before our next story. Let's check in with our resident spooky dude. Hey, you ever smile, or is your face just stuck that way?
I smiled once. The sky bled. A child vanished. Never again.
Okay, drama. Maybe next time just try a dad joke.
Knock knock. They never made it to the door.
Wow. Fine, stay moody. Anyways, back to the darkness. This next one's got teeth.
I found a door to nowhere, by Asleep, Excitement, 65. I'm posting this because I don't want to forget. Forgetting's a terrible thing. My friend would always say that. Once, I asked him why. It was late, the two of us were sitting in this field, and he said something like. A few weeks later, we were hanging out in that field again, stargazing. Whenever he wasn't talking about something vague and philosophical, he'd be talking about the stars. Ever since we were little, he said he wanted to be an astronomer. Sometimes, he would get this glint in his eye, and say he wanted to see what else was up there. I'm not sure, I could always tell when something piqued his curiosity, just by that glint in his eye. Something about it always got me worked up too. Wanna go open it? I wasn't really asking, just saying what we were both thinking. My friend didn't waste any time, reaching for the handle as soon as it was within arm's reach. The handle turned with a satisfying click, and he promptly pushed it open, but what we saw on the other side wasn't more of the same old field. No, on the other side there wasn't any grass, or the distant glow of fireflies. An inky black sky painted with streaks of silver stretched endlessly outward. If the sky here was a sea of stars, what was behind this door must have been the other six. Needless to say, my friend was on the other side without a second thought, and I was soon after. Yeah. Where do we go first? He looked back at me, with that glint in his eye. We walked for a while, and quickly realized it was farther than either of us thought. It towered into the sky, standing at its base made it seem like it went on forever. Its walls were smooth, and on closer inspection, marbled with a brilliant silver. It shone dimly like cracks of sunlight through the curtains on a lazy summer afternoon. What stood out more to me than all of that, was that it didn't have a door. A rectangular hole abruptly interrupted its otherwise seamless surface. We gotta see what the inside looks like. He was starting to sound more and more worked up. That glint in his eyes was less of a glint now, and more like a shine. Like the silver marbling, like the silver speckled sky, like long dead stars that refused to be forgotten. We paused for a moment, peering into the enigmatic structure before us. An endless dark sat inside. Not an inky black like the sky, but a strange foreboding emptiness. It was as if the darkness in that place was more than an absence of light. I guess I should say that it was less than that. Another soft crunch. We stepped back. something was wrong. The novelty of this place had run its course and we began to realize just how alien it was. It was like I was little again, standing at the bottom of the stairs just as I had shut off the light. These stars that stared at us from the dark were not ours. Not the ones we had watched for years on end. Those ghastly, yellow will-o-wisps stared back at us. What is that? I couldn't answer his question then. I still can't.
Whew, telling gave me chills. But hey, we're just getting started. The next one's sharper. You'll see.
My son asked me to check the closet for monsters. I didn't need to, by Eigengrology. I recently went through a pretty nasty divorce, but I got the only thing that mattered out of it, full custody of my 4-year-old son. Lost nearly everything else in the process, so we had to relocate to a new house with barely any luggage or furniture. He was wide awake and asked me to check the closet for monsters, which wasn't surprising given the circumstances. And you know how they say that your brain always stays half awake when you're sleeping in a new environment, right? It was no big deal. It was all normal, I thought. Something was wrong. That's why I didn't freak out. I couldn't, not when we had barely just started our new life. I had to protect him, and at that point in time as I sat on his bed I only knew one thing. We had to leave the room. "All right, champ, of course," I said, faking bravery. Then I made a request of my own as I lowered my voice and got closer to him. I made sure to put some extra emphasis on the word, but, because it's something that always cracks him up when I say it. Fortunately he got stuck on that and not the fact that I was indirectly admitting to the possibility of there actually being a monster. When I heard the closet doors slowly creaking open behind me I knew it was time to go. And I know his room didn't have a closet.
That last one tasted like fear and poor decisions. Let's see what the next bite stirs. Hope you're hungry.
I saw something on the evening news that I can't explain, by OQS. My work friends and I were out at our favorite pub last night. Not a really fancy place but, you know, cheap beer and close enough to home that I don't have to drive. The night started out normally enough, the 4 of us crammed into a small table off in the corner, mostly talking shop and shitting on our boss. Being this was the middle of the week there weren't too many other people around, maybe around 8 or 9 others in the whole place. Everybody just kinda keeping to themselves, sorta people you'd expect to see in a pub on a Wednesday. Anyway, from where I'm sitting I have a pretty good view of the TV behind the bar. Jesse the bartender is kinda lazily flipping through channels and passes by our local news channel. There's a brief burst of orange and red on the screen which I register as a fire happening somewhere, which then disappears as Jesse switches over to the next channel. Something about the image looks oddly familiar though. But then, a few moments later, hang on, the reporter on TV says, "We're getting some updated information." It seems, hang on one moment, while we readjust the camera. The previously locked down camera starts to shift, the angle focusing on an area of the building about halfway up the west side. All the lights in the building are out except for one. I feel a weird creeping sensation as I start counting the windows from the bottom. 5 up, 2 over. That's my place. I swore I turned that light out, I think at first. Then I see it. What in the fuck, I say, my voice a hoarse whisper. And then the camera gets a little closer, and finally we can make out the person's features. The creature stops moving. For a second, I see its expression change. The comical look of horror is gone, replaced by a huge smile filled with enormous, pointed teeth. Then the lights go out.
Still with us? Good. That last one was just the warm-up. Let's go deeper.
The house was a steel. 2 stories, right in the middle of town. A winding staircase, the kind I always wish I had as a kid. Ample kitchen with brand new appliances and a ceiling in the living room I couldn't reach even if I jumped with my arms up. It was an old house and it sat right in the middle of an equally old square in a town that was small enough and far enough away from the city you could see the stars at night, but not so small that we weren't in walking distance from an old ice cream shop, a diner, a couple restaurants. Charm and character, in both the house and where it was located. The house was ideal. At least, it should have been. But the other reasons were for us. We wanted a house we could afford, one that felt like we weren't stuffing ourselves and our belongings inside like sardines. A place we could call our own, that we could fill with new and better memories. "This is Wynn's room," Jess had said, almost as soon as she stepped in. And following her inside, I saw why. The room was the second largest bedroom in the house. The color of the carpet was different, a verdant green. The windows were lower, with wide ledges I could just see becoming the perfect stages for Wynn's already impressive collection of toys. An ample closet, the only one in the house that didn't have any loose nails hanging from the paneled interior. And then there was the nook. "Oh, good thinking," the realtor said, smiling and stepping into the threshold of the nook with us. This was the former owner's kids' room too. They left this here. August 2nd, 01, for Marie. "I thought to leave that," the realtor said, smiling at the way we were examining the names. "Some houses need a little record of good memories." We agreed. And, in hindsight, seeing that room was what sold us. What helped us overlook the work we'd need to put into the place, the sloping floors next to the front door and the unfinished basement. The spackling it so badly needed, the doorknobs that needed replacing on nearly every door. Sun up to sundown. My work was pretty laid back, which was a blessing. It meant that I could watch Wynn during the day. Our parents weren't far, and we could get either set of them to sit for us if we needed, but, I don't know. I guess I had this thought that I could really build some good memories with her those first few weeks. We'd been so caught up in life in the city, and our apartment there was so small. We'd nearly spent the entirety of our daughter's first 3 years on top of each other. I wanted to give her a space she could explore, a space she could settle into and find out was her own. I wanted her to play. How did we live with all of this before? Jess asked me. We were unpacking Wynn's clothes and toys in her room while she watched TV downstairs. The TV was the first thing we had set up, and our daughter's room was next on the list. Our things were still in boxes. "I don't know," I said, unloading a box filled with stuffed animals and a variety of small, plastic bugs. She was a tomboy, and we knew that already. She was obsessed with bugs, with playing in the dirt. Animals. She had less of an interest in princesses and more of a taste for what lived in the dirt. For what lived under rocks. "She's going to grow out of all of this so fast," Jess said, a little t-shirt in her hands as she folded it and put it in Wynn's dresser. "In a few years we'll just be packing all of this away and taking it to Goodwill." "I guess so," I said, unpacking my own box, "or maybe we'll find someone to give it all to. Hand-me-downs." I looked at her, my face lighting up with a smile. Warmth shooting through me, giddy and sudden. She didn't turn around, but I could tell she said it with a smile in her voice. We were going to make this place our home, a real home. We had years and years worth of dreaming to fill every corner of the house. We were going to grow our family here. It was one of the first joyful moments in that new house. Every night before we tucked Wynn into bed, I set out her toys for her in the morning. She had a few favorites, a pink bunny we thrifted while Jess was still pregnant, some bright and speckled blocks. A brown plastic spider, a green grasshopper. Plastic flowers she could take apart and put back together again, stem and leaf and bud. A plastic spade and shovel with miniature handles and a set of tiny toads. Before, at our cramped apartment, I had laid each of them out at the foot of her bed, burying the bugs and toads in her comforter. Setting up the flowers in their pieces, the blocks next to her dig site, and the bunny behind the rest, to watch over them all. And Win had the same routine every morning. As soon as she woke up she would take the spade and the shovel and dig out her friends. Finding them in the dirt and saying, "There you are," with each one she unearthed. The first night we spent in that house, I decided to make a change. I took her baby blanket, the one she no longer slept with but still dragged around with her sometimes into our room or to take in front of the TV, and buried her friends underneath. Taking them all over to her nook. Setting snacks in the threshold of the door to lead the way. So, I spent the beginning of my day watching my little girl wake up. Sitting up in her bed, watching the days of sleep wear off as she looked around, half wondering where she was, in the same way we all do when we wake up someplace new and strange. I saw her look to the foot of her bed for her friends. Her puzzled expression at their absence lasted only a few moments before Snacks caught her eye, sitting in the corner, her fluffy pink sign that led to her own little rabbit hole, lighting the way. I had no idea what the next few weeks had in store for me. For us. Before the lonely way. Before milkshake. I would have run away and never looked back. Still, I tried to keep my voice down. I didn't like that look. Instead, when I turned around, I saw our closet door was open. Jess standing right by it, her arms crossed. Pale. But that memory was losing its color now. "I'm sorry," she said, I don't know, shouldn't there be a wall there?" "It's plywood," I said, "it's like, really flimsy plywood." She nodded, some of the worry fallen off of her face. She was with me, and I with her, both of us curious as hell. "I think they were nailed together once," I said, feeling it come loose after a few careful tugs. "But why?" she asked, taking the panel with gentle hands and laying it next to us at the back of the closet. It was an old staircase, dusty in the dark, with boarded steps rising at a sharp incline, summiting before a thick wooden panel covering a hatch above. I wondered if her heart was beating as fast as mine was. "Well, we have to go up there," Jess said beside me, taking a step forward. But Jess was determined. And, in the half-decade we'd been married, I learned quite well that getting in her way when she made up her mind about something would do either of us any good. So I settled for following her, close behind, wincing as I put my foot on the bottom stair. "People fill in pools, not attics," she said. "Besides," she went on, her fingers splaying wide over the piece of wood above her, "I'm not going to sleep in this room for 1 second knowing there's some fucking secret space above me." And she had a good point there. But then the wood gave and, together, we stared into the unknown dark. "Babe," she said, turning to me, both of us smushed up against each other standing halfway out of the stair into the new place, "did we just win a bonus attic?" Well, we all know what could be hiding at the end of that thought. I'd be lying if I said that the thought didn't cross my mind while taking apart the panels at the back of the closet. And again at some point through the following weeks. It was a persistent echo, a little whisper in the back of my head growing long in tooth and throat, harder and harsher. But you know what scares away the spookies? Sitting up in bed with Jess that night, talking way later than we meant to, dreaming while awake about all of the things we could do with that attic, a playroom, a bigger office, a super cool bedroom for Win when she got older. We imagined our girl as a full-blown teenager, sneaking out of the tiny attic window we spotted in the far corner to the roof, climbing down the tree in the front yard to meet her friends for some late-night teenager mischief. There were other joys too. Win's growing routine in her nook, the way she looked up at us and smiled after running around in the backyard and turning over rocks for earthworms. The way the sun came in the kitchen and lit Jess's face up on the slow mornings we had most weekends. The walk we all took together down the street, noticing how close we were to the elementary school even if the years when we'd need to think about that seemed so far away. So measured. A house is what you put in it, and we put in a lot of love and hope in those early days. I wish it would have caught. I wish it had been enough. That was the story I thought I deserved to tell. I ignored it then, thinking it must have been another voice joining the strange chorus of this old house. But come morning while arranging Wynn's toys for her, I found something odd. Its pattern was like a milk snake's, but off-colored, the hallmark yellow and orange pattern along the spine instead an array of gray hues. Shades of ash standing out against its black, curling length. Only the eyes looked real. Little red beads ruby bright even in the shadow of the nook. "Honey," I said, confused, "what is this?" "Milkshake?" Wynn asked. My frown returned and deeper this time. I'd only been up for an hour, reading emails and drinking coffee on the porch after Jess left. I never came into Wynn's room until the sun was up, until I was sure she would be stirring out of sleep, just in case my little arrangement woke her up. "There's not a toy box, honey," I said, "maybe Mom brought it in before she left for work." But Wynn shook her head. "There is," she said. "Where, baby?" I asked, craning my head around the room, taking in her bed, her closet, the nook. "There is," she said, louder this time, the edge of a rising tantrum cutting her words. "Where, Wynn?" I asked, ready for some kind of game. A toy box could be a closet drawer, it could be a shoe. It could be a pillowcase, and maybe Jess had snuck in the middle of the night to slide the toy somewhere Wynn would find it. Maybe she was trying to get in herself on the game, her own little secret addition to the ritual. "Show me then," I said, ready to be led. I stuck out my hand. Wynn took it, turning away from me and leading me to the nook. And those 3 steps across the carpet of her bedroom were the last easy ones I ever took there. Its lid was closed. I caught a whiff of something breathy. Of spoil and sick. "It's in there," Wynn said, I thought she said, stomping her foot, a habit she'd picked up from Jess when there was nothing else to do and she was overwhelmed. I flinched, I stared down at her, my breath catching. "It's been there. Been there all along."
Sleeping yet? Didn't think so. Next story's up. And yeah, it's worse. You're welcome.
The seminarian said he found a lost gospel. Then he vanished, by notes from Gehenna. I'm quiet. That's how I came to meet the seminary kid. He approached me while I was back there alone. I think he somehow sensed I had wisdom for him, that I had been in his shoes not too long ago. I say this because we were soon talking about the Bible, then philosophy, and then dread. My 3 greatest understandings. But the more he went on, the more troubling it all became. I understood what was happening, to an extent, and it was troubling. But when fishing day came he was grouchy. Quite clearly. I thought he might lighten up while we crafted arcane poles but he did not. His spirit was in a quagmire of despair. When people like me, and him, get interested in first-century Christianity, we often get interested in the Christianities that didn't survive. The lost heresies. We know a few of them. The Gnostics are particularly famous, though scholars now argue that the various groups lumped under that name were too different to be called the same thing. There's also the Marcionites. And whatever community wrote the Gospel of Thomas. The Ebionites. Anyway. From a historical perspective, heretical 1st and 2nd century Christianities are deeply fascinating. But it's tragically common for young people who gain an interest in these subjects to convince themselves they've uncovered some ancient conspiracy. That one of these heresies was actually the true Christianity. They claim to back it up with textual and material evidence. That's what the seminary kid was up to. I suspected it from the beginning and had a speech planned to ease into it gently, but it failed, truly. Of course he brought up the hexing of the true saints. And of course that was his main focus. Okay, so there are a lot of heretical texts. I already brought up the Gospel of Thomas, but the hexing of the true saints is one literally never mentioned in academic circles, but cannot seem to be fully erased from all the dark caverns of the internet. Most scholars don't even know about it, and the ones that do won't admit they do. Let me explain some of the history here. All present-day Christian churches originate from what historians call the Proto-Orthodox Church. So the Catholic Church, the Russian Orthodox Church, all forms of Protestantism, are descendants of the Proto-Orthodox Church. Now at the time of the Proto-Orthodox Church, there were other Christian churches that did not survive. They were silenced, and the Proto-Orthodox Church's beliefs became dominant. These beliefs also happen to have the best understanding of the historical Jesus. The hexing of the true saints is some internet-born document that claims to be authentic. Its fictional narrative purports that the Proto-Orthodox Church, although, of course, that's not the name they used, crafted a hex, curse, jinx, spell, with a demon, I've forgotten its name, and used it to condemn all opposing Christians to Nod. The land of confusion. The heretics, or the true saints, LOL, were sent into a living state where they could never quite make sense of things and could only remember life in fragments that did not connect. They were confused until death. Those hexed could be identified by a scar on their heart. A scar formed from fire that does not burn but bewitches, or so the phony text says. But then the priest stopped me halfway through my explanation, saying, "Wait, sorry, who are you referring to? Which kid in seminary? What did he look like?" I said, "I met him at that event. Lots of people were there. My wife met him." I chuckled a little. I couldn't seem to respond. He reminded me of how tempting it can be, for a young man, to get interested in the historical Jesus. He starts reading about the Q source, Paul's 7 undisputed letters, the criterion of dissimilarity. Then he finds some heretical text, something called the hexing of the true saints or whatever dramatic title its author gave it, that they can't quite get rid of for some fucking reason. It always slithers its way back. And when that creeping young man finds the hexing of the true saints, he might start thinking there is some truth to its nonsense, he might start talking about it. Touch the scar on your chest.
Still here? Aw, look at you. Brave little meatbag. Too late to back down now. Next story's already watching.
Mr. Lackavote, by Nocturnal Nanny. I'm not sure if this will help anyone, but if my story saves even one person from the nightmares I now endure, I will consider it a win. I have borrowed a phone that was smuggled in here, and the orderly, that now monitors every move I make will be coming shortly, so I must be brief. Silence. After a moment, I decided to open my eyes and cautiously look towards my closet. I physically heard the clock that was placed on my nightstand stop ticking, and that's when I met him. Petrified, frozen in place, I tried to ask him what wrong I had done, but before I could finish he was right in front of me. His breath smelled of rotting flesh and death itself as he breathed down my face. Again, I heard his voice as if it were my own thoughts. "I am the keeper of Votis, you know what you did. You will right your wrong or I will take your eyes, along with your eternal soul. You have 24 hours. Trying to clear my head, I decided to open Reddit, as it always seemed to make me feel better and relaxed. While I was scrolling, I passed the story I had read the night before. The one that had made the hair on the back of my neck stand. As the sun slowly set, I decided I might as well wait in my room and hope that I had redeemed myself, or possibly chance losing my eyes and my soul. The thought of that alone made me vomit into the trash can next to my bed and tremble violently with deep, petrifying terror. "Don't let it happen again," he bellowed in a voice that to this day still haunts my dreams. Then he was gone. I know some of you won't believe me. Hell, I'm not even sure if I believe myself. As the doctor here says, it's all in my head. But, for the love of your eyeballs and your soul, do not forget to vote while you are reading stories on Reddit, or you too will have the pleasure of meeting Mr. Lackavote for yourself.
Something's still listening, and it wants more. Next story. Just don't say its name.
The previous tenant of my new flat left a survival guide. It's time to end this madness, by Nutatown JM. I was frozen to the spot in shock. I felt no pain at all from the burn on my face, everything was numb. The relief of eradicating the imposter neighbors and the joy at finding a friend in Derek was hacked away in an instant. Just like every leaf from my shrubs. Why would she do this? What had I ever done to her? Every question possible crossed my mind. I could feel the frustration bubbling inside me. Everything about this place just threw up question after question, and for every answer I got, there were 10 new questions waiting to be asked. At that moment in time though, only one was truly important. I stood there frozen pondering all these things until I saw Prudence collapse onto the memorial bench sobbing, head in her hands. She was surrounded by the remains of my attempt at a garden with the shears laid out on the floor. The stairs were kind to me on the way down, it took 4 flights to make it to the bottom. I ran down the corridor and out the back entrance of the block, no idea what I was going to say. She sat bolt upright before turning and standing quicker than I thought it possible for an old lady. "You evil, stupid little girl. Do you have any idea what you've done?" She screamed, so much animation in her face that the spaces between her wrinkles pulsated like veins on an angry weightlifter. "Me? You think I'm evil? You left that shitty note hidden, missing everything I need to know, and got my boyfriend killed. And what you're doing to your own dash," I screamed, tears beginning to roll, before she interrupted me. "Don't you dare talk about her." Her voice cracked and she broke down again, this time falling to her knees, twigs and leaves sticking to the bottom of her dress. I didn't know what else to do. So I sat down on the floor. I knew that it was probably a bad idea, this woman couldn't be trusted and I hadn't forgotten that, but seeing an old lady crying on the cement floor still made me feel awful. She shoved a crumpled up piece of paper into my hand, she didn't look at me, her eyes remained on the floor. I couldn't exist knowing what I'd done. I knew what he had done as soon as I finished the note. Lila, or what was left of her, was gone for good. Of all the creatures only Jamie's killers from the lift remained. That's how Derek had spent the few hours I'd slept between our encounters. I was grieving. And then I had her back for all those years, and then I lost Bernie, and then my home, and now I have to grieve for her all over again. Prudence continued to cry, but softer. I looked around at the chaos she created and up at the block my boyfriend had died in and rolled my eyes in disbelief that she could be so selfish. She continued. "Let me tell you about Lila. She was a beautiful little girl. As I mentioned before, I have 2 other older children, they've had many other grandchildren, however I hadn't spoken to my eldest 2 in years even before what happened with Lila. Lila was my first opportunity to get to know one of my grandchildren. Bernie adored her too, always reading her stories and sneaking her sweets. It was a miracle when he agreed. I was more shocked he had convinced his wife to allow it. That awful harlot of a woman never liked me, although I didn't like her either. They refused to speak to me after everything. I haven't heard from them since. They had more grandchildren I'll never meet. I knew at the time my relationships with any of my children were over for good. So when Derek gave me a solution, I took it. But I couldn't pass up the idea of my beautiful little Lila meeting her grandma forever. I suppose I was too ashamed to admit it before. But why should I be ashamed? Bernie hated me. Spending time with Lila was all I lived for. I grew to love her how she was. I felt sick. Listening to Prudence talk brought up so many repressed feelings about Jamie. I hadn't had time to grieve or process anything. I missed him terribly. My old life and my old future felt a million miles away. I was relieved to know that Derek hadn't tricked Prudence, or even intended to create Rat Lila. He was truly good. She had stopped crying. Her rage levels were rising again. I tried to tell her that it wasn't really the child she'd known, but she seemed to have grown an entirely new attachment to the creature that replaced what she lost. Every rational argument I gave was met with increasing levels of screaming. She got less coherent as she went on. The argument was going nowhere. We went back and forth for what felt like forever. After a while she started to get closer to me. We had both stood up by this point, and despite her haggard and frail appearance, Prudence was truly frightening. She looked unhinged. Her words were no longer going in. I was overwhelmed and had too many thoughts rushing through my mind to process her ranting. I took a few steps back, clearing a small distance between us. By this point, out of the corner of my eye, I could see neighbors in windows of the block, watching the altercation outside. Prue's screaming had brought a lot of attention. It was bright and I couldn't see well, but I turned to scan the windows and did recognize Eddie and Ellie watching from their bedroom, trying to wave at me. The twins had been telling me to turn around. I shouldn't have taken my eyes off her. By the second floor most were still locked, but a few had come out of their homes, armed with a variety of heavy objects. Even in a crisis, I couldn't fault the community spirit here. I ran another flight of stairs that became 2 but still lead me to floor 3 and then to the back of the corridor. I pounded on Terry's door. It had been a week since I moved in, and it wouldn't be long until people realized something was seriously wrong. My conversations with my family had been short, with me insisting they didn't visit until we were unpacked and set up. On top of a murderous old lady and an untold amount of abnormal issues, the real-world problems were starting to creep up on me. Their transformation prompted me to head back to my flat. It was late. I needed to work out what to do next and how to dig myself out of this giant hole. I couldn't just keep planting gardens. I needed to do this myself. I wandered up the stairs. They went on for a while, but nothing too horrific. I passed the man on floor 5, nodding politely and continuing my ascent. I wondered if he'd received the letter of concern yet. He was a little unsettling. "I will kill you for what you've done," she whispered into my ear. Without a second thought I leaned forward just a tad and swung my head back as hard as I could. I couldn't believe that it worked, but I must have broken her nose. Prudence dropped the knife and clutched her face, blood streaming between her fingers. I ran towards his door, Prudence stabbing at me frantically with blood gushing from her nose. A few got me as I stopped outside flat 48. The pain was awful and I could feel myself starting to drift out of consciousness. I was losing a lot of blood. It was a shot in the dark. I didn't know what would happen, but I had to try something. She had stopped stabbing at me. She was enjoying watching me bleed out slowly from the wounds she had already inflicted. The police told me that the person had seen the mugging out of their window. They had seen 2 men approach me and Jamie, splash something in my face, attack us, and when he tried to fight back, they bundled my boyfriend into a car, which the police had been searching for to no avail. He was officially missing. I had been stabbed 4 times, but thankfully in all the right places, if there is such a thing as the right place to be stabbed. I lost a lot of blood, but I was going to be fine. They were all shallow. They assumed my burns were chemical and happened during the mugging too. The police promised to keep us updated, but they still can't find the car. They never will. I wish the story the police had been told were true. It left some hope for Jamie. My parents weren't keen on me returning to the flat after what happened. They said the area was too rough, and that I was living proof it wasn't safe. They offered to collect my stuff for me. I insisted though, told them that I wanted to see how I felt and they couldn't force me not to. I was released from the hospital 2 days after I woke up in there. When I arrived at the flats, it was strange. It felt like home. Despite everything, something about this place drew me to it. I wasn't sure you'd come back. It's nice to see you're up and walking. He made small talk as if I hadn't seen him literally trample a woman to death a couple of days prior. The whole experience had been so disorienting that I started to wonder if I really had been mugged and had dreamed the note and everything that's happened since. Then he said something that confirmed everything was real. I never liked that woman. But you've got a real friend in the lady downstairs. He winked at me and turned the key in his door. I got into mine and sat down on the second-hand sofa. I felt empty but relieved. With Prue and the imposter neighbors all gone, the only threat left were the creatures in the lift, who were only a threat between 1.11 and 3.33. Terry knocked on the door, my handbag, that I had left at hers before Prue attacked in my flat, on her arm. Mr. Prentice was right, she was a good friend. He was eating it. She said. I tried replanting the garden with the help of the twins. I ripped a few stitches doing it and Derek never came. I think he's gone for good.
Whew, telling gave me chills. But hey, we're just getting started. The next one's sharper. You'll see.
Nessie is Not What We Thought, by Angel Halo 777. No one ever really believes in the Loch Ness Monster anymore, do they? Since the first time it was introduced in a local newspaper in 1933 as a picture taken by 2 idiots and a really old camera, everyone and their mother has seen it. My question to you would be, how could a monster live for this long? I used to believe in Nessie when I was very young, watching TV shows like Monster Quest, which dragged in people to talk about the weird things they saw in the water. I loved everything sea monster, sea serpent, and dragon-like, until I committed the unfortunate act of growing up. A part of me still loves the idea. Even now. But considering where I am right now, I wish I had just stayed the fuck home. I promised that I meant absolutely no harm when I stole the motorboat from my gracious hosts when they went out for dinner together. I promised that I wasn't that high when I was out on the water. Now, I know what you're thinking. Something along the lines of, you probably had some weed laced with something stronger and tripped so hard you thought you saw something. What I experienced wasn't a trip. I wish it was. I couldn't for the life of me tell you what color they were, how they were shaped, or how big they were. It's like they've erased from my memory, and all I feel when I try to think of them is a sense of wrongness, and the knowledge that what I was looking at I wasn't meant to see. I couldn't look away though, and whether it was from fear or from fascination, I remember not being able to do much of anything other than stare with my heart in my throat. She wouldn't blink. I thought about how weird it was that she wasn't blinking, and then, she spoke. A delicate, tinkling laugh floated through my mind, and I realized that whatever this thing was, it was speaking to me through some kind of telepathic link. Or, I might have been higher than a kite. I don't really know anymore. It felt like a good idea at the time. Again, the laugh echoed in my head and I leaned further over the boat, getting used to the odd, wrong eyes that looked up at me from the inky waters. How? I asked. It's a secret. That's also a secret. You're Nessie. I heard myself say, my voice sounding distant to my own ears in comparison to the voice that spoke in my mind. I am what you believe me to be. If you're what I believe you to be, why aren't you a giant plesiosaur or a massive sea serpent? I've been trapped here for centuries. She replied, her voice echoing through my mind like it was a wide open space. God, what color were her eyes? Bound by what? I asked. My mouth hadn't moved, but still, the question was asked. Have I got a weird story for you? I don't want to die down here. She's out there hunting, but she'll be back soon. And I'll end up just like the rest of these people who were dragged down just like me. There's no way out. Please. My name is /redacted/, and my dad is /redacted/. I live at /redacted/, and I have 2 sweet cats who won't know where their mama is. Weirdly enough, just knowing that they won't know where I went makes me feel worse than the idea of my own mortality. I hear her. She's back. God, I hope it's quick.
Need a break? Too bad. These stories don't wait, and neither do we. Next one's worse. In the best way.
So I come from a broken home life. Originally, we were totally nuclear, until our lives went nuclear. Mom and Dad had a messy divorce, and my mom, getting full custody, took me and my younger brother from nowhere, Illinois, to Ireland. She said something about wanting to get away from a toxic environment. I don't know. All I do know is that at 14 years old, I was in a new house, in a new country, with a new culture, just trying to get my bearings. I didn't have a hard time making friends in school, but it still felt awkward, being the new kid, with a weird accent. James was having a harder time. He was an imaginative kid. Maybe a little too imaginative, which probably weirded out some of his peers. When I would go with my friends to hang out after school, James would join me, our mother insisting I take him along. I had no problems with it, my relationship with James was good, and we generally weren't at each other's throats like most siblings would be. I think it's because we both realized that besides Mom, we really only had each other after the move. My friends would always be hesitant when I wanted to go hang out in the woods. Come to think of it, looking back, we'd rarely encounter any kids while we played in the forest, at most maybe a few hikers, but that's it. It makes sense to me now, but at the time, I couldn't understand why. It took a lot of prying before one of my friends, while we were playing video games, in a hushed tone, gave his reasoning on why they avoid the woods. Nah, dude. Not faking. Faye. King. Sean spaced it out. Like, fairies and stuff. He mumbled. Fairies? Dude, get real. Just be honest and say you saw a body in there once or something. Shut up. I'm serious. People get lost in the woods. My mom knew a person who tried to find the Fae King when she was little. She said the words, and walked into the forest, and never came out. Words? I raised my eyebrow at him. He nodded. It's not just idiots who try to call him in either. Sometimes, people say he appears to anyone who gets lost in the woods. It's either take a chance with the Fae King, or die in the woods. So yeah. The woods suck. He turned his attention back to the game, showing he was done with this conversation. That night, sharing what I learned with James was my biggest mistake. James was a big fan of cryptids, Mothman, Nessie, Braxy, all of them. To learn that there's a cryptid he's never heard of, basically right in his backyard. He had a million questions. What does he look like? What does he do? What are the words? Me not being able to answer any of those questions didn't quell his newfound curiosity, it just encouraged him to find them on his own. The next couple of weeks, he would come to me with his findings, interspersed randomly. "Hey, Tim. Mike says he plays games." Whatever James was able to learn from classmates, much to their reluctance to talk to him, and adults willing to talk about it, there was one thing no one would tell him. The words. No one would crack on what the words were, and it was eating at him. "Come on, guys, please. What's the words? Are they bad words? Is that why you won't tell?" James was especially whiny that day. We tried our best to ignore James, focusing on the screen of the arcade cabinet, at the local arcade. To call it an arcade was generous, it didn't have much inside, but neither did our town, so you make do. Because the nutter always wants to hang out in the woods. Sean rubbed where Brianna hit him. Course not. Her eyes flicked to me for a moment, before back to the screen. Just a legend to stop kids from hurting themselves in the woods. Brianna, just tell him the damn words already, so he can shut up about it. Fine. She huffed. She walked off for a moment, returning with a napkin, words scribbled on it. James was ready to snatch it out of her hand. Slow down. She held the napkin up higher than he could reach. Listen to me, you don't say these words out loud. Not here, not in the words, not anywhere. You got it? She doesn't just look to James. She also looked to me, as if knowing I was going to need to intervene and stop James from making a dumb decision. Even though I don't believe it, people act weird when this guy is brought up. Don't be a pain. She lowered the napkin down, and James grabbed it. I leaned over his shoulder, to read the words myself. The Fey King. I know where he is. The rhyme. We've been there before. Nope, slow down there, Chief. You got your words. You promised to not be annoying about it anymore. You're not going there. I made sure there was a finality in my words, to deter him. James. Are you crazy? I screamed at him, entering the clearing. What's wrong with you? You could have gotten hurt out here, coming out yourself. Because it's stupid, James. Mom doesn't even know we're out here. Come on, let's go back. By Lonesome Stump in Forest Clear, as he spoke, the hair on the back of my neck stood up. Tap 3 times, he will appear, knock. 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 His fist tapped the stump he was sitting on. There was a rustle in the leaves that stopped me in my tracks. The King of Fey will come to play. He said those final words making direct eye contact with me. I turned to stare daggers at him. Just what, huh? Wanted to get whisked away into the forest. To leave Mom worried sick. And no. I just thought, he sniffled. I just thought, that if I met the Fey King, and played with him, I would have a cool story to tell people, and they'd want to talk to me. His voice was so little, dwarfed by the silence of the trees around us. I sheathed my eye daggers, loosening my grip. It was around this time that our conversation had died down. During this lull was when I noticed something wrong. The silence of the trees. It was morning. The forest should be a myriad of chirps and whistles. It was dead silent. The only sound was the wind in the trees, and the occasional snap of a branch. I quickened my pace through the forest. There should have been a path that led right out of the woods. James' eyes grew wide, looking up at me. Tim. He squeaked. There was a stump. We were back to the clearing. This time, we weren't alone. On the stump, stood a well-dressed man, with bright red hair. Sir Dash, I felt my body trembling. The Fey King simply shook his head. Nonsense, Tim. You both made it all the way out here to my home. You even knocked upon my door. He took his arms off of us, and tapped on the stump. The least I could do is entertain my guests. Now, any preference of game? I knew this was a trick of some sort. Fairies are known for their love to fool, and mess with humans in cosmic ways. I had to think of a game that we could have an advantage, something that could give us a chance to get out of here. He snapped his fingers. James was gone. He cleared his throat. I've dropped my ring, where could it be? So find the ring, and yell, he's here. And your little brother shall reappear. Your ring. I shouted, looking around at the floor wildly. What ring? What do you dash? I tried to calm myself down. This isn't so bad. I can do this. I find a ring, call out, he's here, and then the game is over. The man was well dressed, his ring has got to be ornate, and stand out somewhere. I immediately took to searching, scouring the forest floor for a glint, something sparkling. Seconds, turned to minutes, turned to hours. At least, I think it was hours. The sun was locked overhead. I was hungry, but not starving. I was tired, but not exhausted. I began working on autopilot, analyzing every grass blade, leaf, and flower I could find, desperate to find this ring. My memory gets fuzzy at this point. My mother told me it was 2 days before they found me in the woods. I was dirty, my eyes sunken in, and I just kept muttering, where's the ring? He's here, over and over again. When I came to in a hospital bed, it was a barrage of questions, from my mother, from the doctor, from the police. I tried to answer their questions. What was I supposed to say? That a fairy hid my brother by a ring? You've got to stop. She stared at her own hands, unable to bring her face to look at me. Tim Dash. By Lonesome Stump in Forest Clear. The King of Fae is there to stay. Tap 3 times, he will appear. The birdsong stopped. I was listening for it this time. The forest grew quiet. I knew he wasn't going to appear. It didn't matter. I knew where my brother was this time. My feet carried me through the underbrush, while my mind went a million different directions. It was some time later that I found it, in a dense part of the forest, under a large, gnarled oak tree, was a perfect fairy ring. I stepped into the mushroom circle, and rasped, he's here. A beat of silence. Slowly, the oak in front of me shuddered. A seam, the size of a small door, slowly etched its way through the bark, like an invisible force was carving it open. Once the seam connected to itself, the door swung open, and there, sitting with his knees to his chest, was my brother. Tim. What happened? He was clearly startled by my change in appearance. I had so much to tell him. How great it was to see him again. The vindication that I wasn't crazy. The horror of all that he's missed, what that would mean for him. Oh, come now, Tim. That's hardly fair to your brother. It's your turn to hide. He snapped his fingers. I don't know where I am now. Or how long it's been. The walls around me are made of solid wood.
Anyway, let's lighten the mood with something fun and... Nah, just kidding. It gets worse. Hit it.
By the time each of the cars pass, the light is yellow and I speed through the intersection before I get stuck in the middle of it. One of the cars honks at me as it tears through the space where I used to be. The images of a crash flash through my mind as I keep driving and prepare for the second left turn I have to make into the parking garage. I come to a halt and turn on my blinker one final time. I stare in my rearview mirror at the cars I am holding up and probably making late for their own days at work. Thankfully, none of them have started honking at me yet. There is not enough room on the side of the street to pass me, all of the street parking has been taken. They have no choice but to wait behind me, and I have no choice but to make them. Mercifully, the wait for this turn is not nearly as long, and I pull into the garage and find a spot quickly enough that I have a minute to sit and breathe in my car before I have to rush up to the office. I focus on the way my breath feels as it flows through my nose and imagine each of the little pockets in my lungs filling with air. After I've taken 3 of these breaths, I push open my door and step out of my car. My footsteps echo through the parking garage, the clicks of my dress shoes on the concrete playing back to me like a metronome. I scan over the license plates to see who came in today. The Friday before Memorial Day usually turns the place into a graveyard. The empty parking spaces now tombstones for my co-workers who have quite literally gone to a better place. From there the hours begin to blend together. The tapping and plotting continues until it fades into white noise that accompanies my nearly endless clicking, typing, and yawning. Every now and then the monotony is broken by the cracking of my joints or the appearance of Bowman at my cubicle asking for any updates on the Exeter reports. They need to be completed by the end of the day, you know, he says. There is coffee dripping from his blonde mustache. He licks it off and repeats, the end of the day, Frankie. I asked you to call me Francis, Bill, I say back. I don't take my eyes off the computer. I continue filling in cells in the spreadsheet dutifully so that he knows I am dedicated to my work and there is no need to worry. The sense of cordiality that he assumes he has with me has been a source of frustration for my 8 months at this job, but no matter how many times I correct him on my preferred name he continues to think he has earned the right to call me by a nickname I don't even use in my personal life. No one calls me Frankie. I have always been Francis, but for some reason I am Frankie to William, Bill, Bowman and no one else in the office or elsewhere. End of the day, I know. But I don't know how I can get that much work done by the end of the day. That was a whole week's worth of work. I rub my temples and I swear I can feel my brain pounding against my skull. The pressure builds directly behind my forehead and it spreads until it feels like my eyes are going to pop out of their sockets. Well, Frankie bud, I can maybe see if we can get pushed, let me get on the line with Exeter and I'll see what I can do. But you may have to stay late tonight. I take out my phone and shoot her a quick text, going to have to stay late tonight, mind if we push dinner to tomorrow? Texting the missus, Frankie. I jump. I didn't even register that Bowman was still there. You got it, Frankie, I'll get right on it. He walks away. He still has that mug of coffee in his hand. I honestly don't think I've ever seen him without that mug and a bit of coffee in his mustache. I listen to his receding steps as he returns to his office. Once I hear him turn the corner and the sounds of his steps disappear, I take out my headphones and put on some music. My phone buzzes and a computer-generated voice reads out Sam's reply, "Yeah, tomorrow is fine, babes. Be careful on your way home, there's supposed to be a pretty bad storm tonight heart emoji." I take breaks to use the bathroom and buy a few energy drinks from the vending machine in the break room. I drain one in under an hour, but pace myself through the others so my hands aren't shaking while I fill in the reports. By the time the end of the business day rolls around, I have tunnel vision to the point that when I look up the office has emptied out completely. I get up to look around and the only office with anyone left inside is Bowman's. I check the clock and it is already 5 minutes to 6. I pause my music for the time being and just start walking a lap around the perimeter of the place. I walk past the windows and see the storm clouds that Sam mentioned rolling in. They block out the orange-purple twilight and leave only a vast expanse of bluish-gray. I catch a single lightning bolt in the distance and start counting to determine how far off it is. I only make it to 2. I shake my head. There's no way it was that close. It was on the horizon, nowhere near the building. But another strike fires off in the distance, and again the thunder follows almost immediately. We're in for a big one, huh? Oh, I hear you, you gotta rest sometime. Thanks for working so hard on that, I'm sorry you had to cancel your dinner plans. Oh yeah, you said it when I came by after lunch. When I wake up, the office is dark. The rain is hammering against the windows even harder than before, and the only light is from the occasional flash of lightning outside. I grab my phone to check the time, but it doesn't turn. Fuck me, what time is it? I switch my computer on, and the tiny Big Bang bursts on the screen and nearly blinds me with its blue light. The clock on the screen reads 11:11. What the hell? Why didn't Bowman wake me up? I mutter to myself. I tuck my phone into my pocket and move to go check on Bowman's office. But before I do, I pull up the Exeter reports to make sure they're still open and haven't vanished into thin air again. When I open the files, initially everything looks fine, the summaries of the data are all there and everything looks the same as when I left it a few hours ago. If I really pushed I could probably finish up in an hour or two, and I can probably figure out how to backdate the email when I send it over to Exeter. But as I continue scrolling through the document, the paragraphs of data summary vanish and are replaced by one phrase repeated over and over. We're in for a big one, huh? We're in for a big one, huh? We're in for a big one, huh? On and on it went, Bill Bowman's voice echoing in my mind, the sound of him slurping his coffee bouncing inside my skull like a pinball. I clench my teeth and get up. I storm over to Bill's office ready to scream at him for letting me fall asleep and not finish the reports in time. I turn around and see Bill Bowman. Hey Bill, they're good. I should be done by the end of the day. Hey, what time is it? Oh, it's 11:11, he chuckles, make a wish, Francis. I wish it was lunchtime already. Sounds good, Francis, we're in for a big one tonight, huh? The storm, we're in for a big one, he repeated. He licks the coffee from his mustache again, but it isn't coffee. It's clear water. He's dripping wet. His shirt is clinging to his skin and I can make out the beater that he's wearing underneath. His thinning blonde hair is plastered to his head, and rivulets are running down his head and onto his face. The water drips into his coffee mug until it is overflowing and spilling onto the floor between. I lift my foot and hear the squelch of the wet carpet as my weight transfers to my other foot. But he just keeps sipping from his mug like nothing is happening. It spills past the rim and soaks his chin and neck. I spin and look around the office to see if anyone else notices what is happening, but everyone is continuing about their routines as if everything is normal. The wet smacks of feet on the soaked carpet get louder and louder as more people get up from their desks to move around. They all begin to converge on me, and like Bill, they are all soaked to the bone. I gasp for air and get up onto my hand and knees. I can feel the warmth of my blood spilling from my shoulder, and my remaining arm burns in all the spots where the jellyfish man had grabbed me. I heave and groan through the pain as I force myself to my feet. I can't see anything around me. There is only the sound of my breathing and the splashing of the water. I feel a relentless vibrating in my pocket. I pull out my phone and the tiniest bit of light illuminates the floor. There is nothing around me. The jellyfish man is gone. All there is myself, and the endless pool that I am knee-deep in. I look at my phone screen and see that I have gotten over a dozen texts from Sam, each one is some variant on the same theme. She is frantically asking where I am, if I am okay, if I have left the office yet. I unlock my phone and call her. I put the phone to my ear and it rings. No, I don't know what's going on. The office is flooded. I don't even know where I am. I think I'm stuck on the 4th floor, there's nothing else around. Everyone is gone. Okay, I'm checking it now. She falls silent. I stand waiting as I feel the warmth of my blood move past my waist and down my leg. "Thank you, I love you so much, Sam," I heave out. Sam. Sam, what's going on?" I sit back up and feel her arm release from around me, and where it had been there is now a searing, burning pain. Water drips onto her forehead, and as the streams flow down her face, her features are melted away and all that is left is a clear, gelatinous surface. I am clear but I am not hollow. My limbs float freely around me. I feel no structure in my body. I am loose, wiggling slowly like a rag doll cast into the sea. Above me I can see the storm clouds distorted through the shifting surface of the sea that was once my coworkers. I can just barely make out Bowman's mug still drifting on the waves of melted flesh and cloth. I try to move my left arm and it follows along accordingly. I move the right arm next, and begin pumping my tentacle-like legs and slowly push myself upward. There are no buttons for the floors, the doors simply shut behind me and the elevator lurches upward. I stare at the numbers above the door, they still look as if they are being refracted through water. 555. All the way up until 11:11. Look at you coming in on Saturday. And Memorial Day weekend Saturday at that. Bill Bowman is standing in front of me, his hands are empty. "How are you doing, Francis?" "Well, you asked me to stop doing that, if I recall," he says. He puts his hands in his pockets and looks me up and down. "Figured I should put in more effort with that, especially with how hard you've been working. Coming back home, want me to grab breakfast on the way?" I do not wait to see if she answers.
That last one tasted like fear and poor decisions. Let's see what the next bite stirs. Hope you're hungry.
I'm a medical student in my final days of study, and I was in desperate need of a fresh body to practice on. Like many students in my field, I started thinking about buying one. A friend of mine told me about a cemetery guard who could help with that. We both went to meet him, and he agreed to provide a body, on the condition that it had to be buried the same day, so it would still be fresh and complete for dissection. He said the body was ready, and we should come that night at 8 p.m. sharp with the rest of the money. The deal was that only me and my friend would go, no one else, to avoid any legal trouble. I waited outside until finally, he called me and told me to come inside. He said he was getting the body out and needed help moving it. He told me exactly where to go. Then, by some miracle, my legs moved. I ran. I ran toward the wall at the edge of the cemetery, hoping to climb it and escape. But the wall just kept growing taller and taller the closer I got. It was impossible. The next thing I remember, I was on the ground. A hand touched my shoulder. I screamed. But it was the guard. Shaking, I replied. The guard looked at me and said,
"You're still tuned to HorrorSlop. Frequency unknown. Stories endless. Let's spin the next nightmare."
In front of me was my mother, crucified haphazardly upon a ramshackle wooden cross. Rivets were driven through each palm, with rope fastenings in place around her ankles and shoulders to keep her in position. Her mouth was sewn shut, muffling her tired pleas. I surveyed my surroundings. I was in a small, square room, with metal walls no larger than my studio apartment. The roof, however, was missing, replaced by an empty void that seemed to stretch endlessly into the darkness above. About 5 feet in front of me was my mother, writhing weakly against her restraints. 5 feet behind her, an impossibly tall ladder stretching into the abyss. "What are you waiting for?" "As if you care," the voice prompted. Who was talking? Where was this voice coming from? Its warm presence swaddled me like a warm blanket. In one swift surge, the gravity of the situation dawned on me. I didn't know where I was. I didn't like being lost. I needed to get out of here. A knife. A rope. A pistol. Razor blades, full needles, strange pills and powder. And through all the pain, tears and stitches, as I drew closer, she smiled. And as she nuzzled her face into my palm, I cracked. I wept harder than I'd ever wept before. Full-bodied, racking sobs crashed over me. I steadied myself and lifted up my right hand, trembling as I drew closer to her face, ready to pick away at the stitches to the best of my ability. The first few snapped, then the next, until all the stitches had been split and I had liberated her mouth from its cage. But as tears fell down her cheeks, through her warm, loving smile, she uttered one word. Climb. I love you. I climbed past broken rungs, and even when I was tired, I kept on climbing. I cried as I climbed, but I pushed through, with snot dribbling down my chin and tears clouding my vision. I reminisced as I climbed. I climbed through good memories, I climbed through bad memories. I climbed through the time when I had the flu and my mother came around to do my laundry, and I climbed through the time my girlfriend cheated on me. As I placed my hand on the last rung of the ladder and pulled myself up over the edge, I was overcome by brightness. Are you alright in there? Your sister called. We're worried about you. I got up out of the bathtub, and placed the razor blade back on the shelf, walking towards the door. And as I flung it open, she looked at me. She looked at me and she knew. I wouldn't know how to live without you, she whimpered.
Still with us? Good. That last one was just the warm-up. Let's go deeper.
The previous tenant of my new flat left a survival guide. Things just keep getting weirder, by Nutatown JM. And when the trouble really started. I didn't have time to count, but there were more than I originally thought. I figured these must have been the 15 people Prudence talked about, entering the flats that burned before it happened. I already knew that Natalia was one of them. Eddie and Ellie clutched Terry's skirt, trembling with fear. I wanted to help protect them, but I still couldn't help but tremble a little myself every time I caught a glimpse of those hollow voids where their eyes were. Hi Terry, the kid said we could borrow some sugar. She asked menacingly, grinning at the frightened family stood next to me. After a moment or two of intense staring, Natalia finally addressed me. She appeared to be the spokesperson for the group. How's your friend doing? It was a shame we had to end our visit. I was enjoying her company. Natalia chuckled. I gulped. My brothers and sisters are not freaks. You're the freaks. Thinking that your lives have meaning. We watch you people go about your day-to-day lives and your mundane routines and nothing really changes. Your lives are pointless and disposable. Those people weren't disposable, Terry mumbled, barely a decibel higher than a whisper. None of the other people had moved. They just stood there staring. Michael's brother Jonathan lived here, on the floor we burned. He let us hang out there sometimes, but he didn't live the righteous way that we did. He didn't like our beliefs, but he took us in when we lost the place we were staying because of the growth of the group. Him and Michael rarely saw eye to eye. They argued passionately. Our group never believed in living within the constraints of societal norms, and we were up at all hours. We came and went as we pleased, embracing freedoms and listened to music as we did introspective work. You were a group of entitled, bratty hippies following some middle-aged, mentally ill twat. Listen to yourself. The stereotypical cultish drivel coming out of your mouth right now. Terry cried. I was shocked at her outburst. Although I couldn't have agreed more. It did sound like cultish drivel. It made me so angry that this was what an entire floor of people died over. As Terry ended her rant, the curtains hanging on the window behind her burst into flames. I jumped and felt my heart skip a beat. Michael was furious. We brainstormed in a field for hours who could have done it. I personally suspected the next-door neighbor, Mavis. The woman was so nosy, always knocking and asking us to keep noise down, interrupting our spiritual sessions. Michael couldn't make a certain judgment on the person who had done it. All we thought we were sure of was that they had to be on the same floor. So he instructed us to go back that night and eradicate the whole floor and every non-believer who lived there. As you know, we obliged. This incited sick laughter from the crowd. I waited, forcing myself to let her finish. Buying time. We took pleasure in their screams, in watching every man, woman and child go up in flames through their front door windows. It was the first time we'd unleashed all that energy and we felt so powerful. We may have been dead, but we didn't disappear. We couldn't leave the building, we were stuck just wandering it, in and out of the burned flats and hallways, but not allowed anywhere else unless we were asked. It was awful. We didn't try to cause any trouble at first. We waited for Michael to come and find us, instruct us. The old bat didn't tell you that then? She asked, although it wasn't really a question. That her stupid husband is the whole reason we're here. I didn't notice at first when one started walking towards Terry and the kids, but I noticed when it got near. She opened her mouth to reveal rows of sharp teeth, blood caked where the tooth meets the gum where they had grown too quickly as well. Ellie jumped. She reached out towards the girl and slashed her face with the claws, leaving deep gouges across her eyes. She clung on to the girl using her claws as wall pegs, keeping herself at eye level. I stayed on Terry's sofa that night. We organized all the burned items in the house and threw things out before we crashed out in the early hours. The kids' claws retracted and they returned to their earlier state, causing mischief in the hallways. They were too young to really understand. I didn't sleep much. Nothing new. I hadn't checked the time when I left Terry's, but I reached my door at the same time as a familiar face. Postman Ian was stood there, dropping letters on my doorstep. But if Prudence Hemmings could forget to mention what Bernie had done, and conveniently never pass on the method to kill these awful people, leaving them around to terrorize her friends and neighbors, then could she be a liar too? Could I really trust Ian? When he provided no answers and no real help, something inside me told me that I needed to get him out of my flat. I needed to rethink. Start working things out on my own. I made excuses to Ian and sent him on his rounds. This was war.
Anyway, let's lighten the mood with something fun and... Nah, just kidding. It gets worse. Hit it.
My job is watching a woman trapped in a room. Part 4, by Vera Stahl. Part 1. Part 2. Part 3. I felt panic and fear crawling up my chest, making it hard to breathe. Standing up, I started pacing, periodically glancing back at the monitor to see if Rachel could help me, tell me what I needed to do next. But she had laid down on her bed. It was hard to tell for sure with her back to the camera, but I think she was crying. No, I needed to fix this. Get her out of there. And if I didn't have a better plan, I'd just have to go with the one I already had. I opened the camera on the phone as I re-entered the surveillance room and hit record. It made a small beeping noise, and once I was sure it was recording, I turned the camera on myself. All I know is that I work at a building at Radioactive, right outside of San Antonio. Per HorrorSlop rules, to be clear, this address is not real. I only know the names of 2 other people connected to this place. The man who hired me, Mr. Solomon. And a man who might have a job like mine, Charlie Jeffers, no, Jeffries I think. I don't know if they are real people, I don't know if that is their real names. Please. I'm not crazy. I know how this sounds. Just come here, see the room. Figure out where she is and help her. Anne. Hello again, Thomas. I blinked as I began looking around. My mouth was dry and my head hurt, but otherwise I felt okay. I wasn't tied up anymore, instead I was laying back on a padded table like I'd seen when I went to the doctor. The man smiled. You really are something, Thomas. Trying to be the hero, even if you don't quite know how. I respect that. Licking his lips, he leaned forward slightly. In fact, I respect that so much that I've decided to start our new relationship with as much honesty as I'm allowed. Some of my colleagues disagree with this approach, but you know what? Fuck them. This is my project, and I think you deserve to know what's going on. Looking more serious, he stood up, lifting the gun he had been holding casually in his lap. But before we get into the details, would you like to see Rachel? I slid off the table and nodded as I caught myself from falling. My legs were still wobbly from whatever they had given me, but I barely noticed. Yes, please. Let me see her. The real her. I stumbled my way forward, my legs getting better as I walked, and when I grabbed the doorknob, it turned easily. I expected the door to lead to her bedroom, but instead it opened into another room a lot like the one I had been in, though the stuff in it was different. Strange machines filled the walls, and in the back of the room was a large aquarium. I didn't know. It was a big cylinder taller than I was, and it was filled with some kind of gray liquid. There was a shape in that liquid. Go ahead, Thomas. Feel free to go have a good look. You've earned it. I felt my stomach clenching tighter at Mr. Solomon's words and the meanness in them. My legs felt heavy again now, but it wasn't from the drugs this time. Don't worry, Thomas. It won't kill you. Just make you unable to move much for a bit. I heard more footfalls as my body began to still. Get him up, take him back to the other room. Before you ask, well, when you are able to ask anything again, yes, that is Rachel. Not a fake Rachel, not a dummy, and not some kind of trick. As I said, the time for tricks is past. Now is the time for truth. He gestured back to the door behind him. And Rachel has been dead for over 8. I felt my eyes widen as though they belonged to someone else's body. It was more lies. More tricks. All of it. Oh God, it had to be. Do you know what remote viewing is? He rolled his eyes. Sorry, right, you can't talk right now. I'll just assume you don't. Remote viewing is a broad term for the ability to see things that are far away from you physically, to know things you shouldn't be able to know through your normal 5 senses. Some describe it as a psychic ability, though there are several schools of thought as to how and why it works. His eyes fixed on mine intently. Because it does work, Thomas. Various governments and private organizations have studied it for a very long time, and while publicly it is always ridiculed as pseudoscience and foolish superstition, the reality is that some people have the innate ability, that means it comes naturally, to somehow see other places. Solomon folded his hands on his knee. I know you cared for her, Thomas, so I think this is worth sharing. Rachel was never treated badly, other than her confinement and the occasional test that was mildly unpleasant. No, we all treasured her. She was enormously talented, not just as a remote viewer, but as an artist. That's how she would convey what she saw, you understand. She would enter into an almost trance-like state when she painted, and when she was done, she would have given us a painting of images and words that provided, well, it was very valuable information. He chuckled. If you ever wondered, that's why there was always such care that the paintings were never shown to the camera. His lips thinned. And then, one day, she showed a painting to the camera. It said, "Please help me, Thomases." This immediately sent up all kinds of red flags. She knew not to show paintings to the camera, and now she was trying to communicate with someone. We didn't disrupt her routine, but an intensive investigation began into who she was talking to. Was it one of her handlers? One of the technicians? Someone from her past life? But nothing checked out. Leaning back in his chair, a look of pride grew on Solomon's face as he continued. I was the one that first suggested the idea that she was, intentionally or not, knowingly or not, seeing and talking to someone in the future. I was still an outside consultant at the time, but by that point we had more strange behaviors from her, including the second message painting, "That girl isn't me." My theory made some sense, but it very quickly ran into a greater obstacle. I tried to speak, but my mouth still wouldn't work. I wanted to say he was lying, that it didn't make sense, that it was another trick, but I think I wanted to hear it more for myself. Because I didn't think he was lying. I didn't think it was a trick. And I thought I was starting to understand. Solomon looked surprised. I'd have thought that'd be clear by now. You're our only remaining link to one of our greatest treasures. Perhaps you have a similar ability, or it may be that she forged the link purely through her own talent and will. But either way, you are important and you have more work to do. He stood up and moved over to the table where he turned on the monitor. As it came to life, I saw it was a frozen image of Rachel's roommate. Tape paused where I had left off watching. Turning back to me, the man looked solemn.
Still here? Aw, look at you. Brave little meatbag. Too late to back out now. Next story's already watching.
I knew this would happen. I did everything to stop it. I looked in that cursed mirror, sacrificed my sanity, and for what? It was stunning, and dirt cheap. We placed it in the living room of our apartment as somewhat of a centerpiece, framed perfectly against the far wall. I went out for a glass of water and thought I heard people talking. Whispers emanated from the mirror, quietly invading my head. They were vulgar, cruel mantras telling me to hurt my best friend. She saw nothing, just us, and I did too. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I had to be around the mirror initially, but then they started following me. I felt crazy, but she didn't believe me when I blamed the mirror. Just then, a sudden sharp pain streamed across my palms. I shrieked, the mirror remained unmoved. Blood poured out of my hands as I noticed deep lacerations on both palms. If this mirror doesn't want to move, then I'll just smash it. I grabbed a hammer and marched back to the mirror. My reflection looked as if I had the narrowest, eeriest grin. Just as I released, my friend grabbed my wrist. No one should use this mirror, I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. But I needed it out of my life. You can't move it. I whimpered, stunned. She walked up, grabbed the sides and hoisted it off the ground. The mirror allowed her to touch it, wanted her to move it. We walked outside into our dimly lit lot. The dumpster sat just out of the radius of light, illuminated only by the headlights of passing cars. My reflection stared at me, heinously. I stood frozen. Shadowy tentacles slowly emerged out of the mirror and lurched towards my friend. I ran to her side and yanked her away. But the whip-like arms lashed out more aggressively. Screams of haunting terror echoed from the mirror. I jumped between them, shoving her out of the way. I collapsed in disbelief. My sobs cracked, then twisted. I knew I was next. I turned to see my reflection in the mirror, smiling deviously. Each scratch quickly sealed back up before my next swing. Out of pure rage, pent-up insanity, I sent the hammer as hard as I could, screaming with fury. A lone crack sprouted. Cracks webbed outward, not just in the mirror, but in reality itself. Darkness engulfed me in the form of fog. Anne. My best friend. You finally did it. She cheered. You broke your psyche. Now, the mirror is quelled. I never died. The mirror just needed you to believe that I did, in order to feast on your sanity. I was betrayed. She gasped. Why, since the beginning. The moment we saw it in the flea market, it showed me everything, including my death. It would have taken me, too, if I didn't feed you. The fog lifted enough for me to see remains scattered along the ground. Skulls. Bones. Tattered clothing. Welcome to hell. Suddenly a crack formed along her reflection's neck. I heard her struggle as she gurgled. We had a deal. Tentacles shot out of the mirror and sporadically pierced into her. Her bones popped, flesh ripped, and blood wrung out of her orifices. The crack repaired itself. Just like that. My best friend was gone. In that same moment I felt a jarring blow against my skull. Then, I plunged into sleep. I awoke in my apartment bedroom, alone. Days passed. Then months. Then years. That was, until my granddaughter mistakenly forgot my one and only rule, no mirrors. I saw my wrinkles, my decaying flesh. It's hungry, bestie.
That last one tasted like fear and poor decisions. Let's see what the next bite stirs. Hope you're hungry.
They told me I was nothing but a dog, by Dopamine. My father meant to humiliate and degrade me with such a name, but he honored me instead. Nothing but a dog. What must it be like to not understand what I was seeing, or why it was suddenly so loud and so hot? What must it be like to not understand why, after being plucked from cruel streets and dropped into a bustling world of kindness, I was now alone? Perhaps I would think I'd been a bad dog. Perhaps I'd think this was my punishment. Even so, I adapted to punishment. As I said, it eventually becomes a language. Given enough time, anyone can learn a language. What I could not adapt to was fear. As a child, I was afraid of everything. You see, in the deepest, most forgotten parts of the world, there are things that most people cannot believe and even fewer would understand. Old ways, old things, old truths. And old monsters. He was not a spirit, he had a corporeal body of his own, a twisted, monstrous thing covered in scars and hard, glittering skin, a body that could shrink to the size of a garden snake or expand to the size of a house. Then she turned around, and in her bruised sockets I saw my grandfather's eyes, flat, glittering yellow. Like rotted gold. I reared back, screaming. My father, who had been stroking a pair of old baby shoes, looked at me with contempt so deep it scorched my heart. Shut up, dog. I cringed. This was a mistake, his contempt exploded into disgust. He shot out of his chair and stomped upon me. Dirty, squirmy pain exploded across my abdomen. I hobbled away, whimpering, and hid under the stairs. Laika. When I woke, I felt her, furry and warm, chest rising and falling under my hand. I opened my eyes. For just an instant I saw her in the shadows. Then she shrank away, sinking into the ground. I tried to grab her, but the floor swallowed her. My fingers closed on cold, hard floorboards. I covered my eyes and wept. Spurred by horror, I immediately ran out into the night. The cold was brutal, at once invigorating and exhausting. I searched until I found the baby, whimpering weakly beside a snowdrift. He was still covered in birth blood. I looked up, and swallowed a whimper. Grandfather stared back at me through my mother's rotting face. The mouth, puffy and discolored, with an oddly detached look, quirked into a smile. No. Let the dog keep her pup. We have other concerns. His chapel was an ancient stone structure at the base of a wooded hill. Within the chapel were 3 red windows and 6 rough-hewn pews. At the end of each pew sat desiccated corpses, facing the altar like sentries. I hated grandfather's chapel. The very air weighed upon me whenever I entered, crushing my heart and poisoning my lungs. The worst part was the fear, electric and paralyzing, inescapable. Luckily, I was just a dog, and dogs do not spend much time inside chapels. But dogs hear screams. Even screams from far away, echoing down forested mountains long into the night. If it weren't for Alexander, I would have withered into nothing. He was more than a brother to me, for all intents and purposes, he was my son. Neither father nor grandfather cared for him. They didn't even feed or clothe him. I had to feed and dress him with what little I had. Yes. I understand, he said. His grip tightened on the shoes. But you don't have a choice. I choked back a sob and waited for the dismissal. I could not come to him without crawling, and I could not leave until he told me so. Instead, he said, "Stand up, Laika." I said, "Stand up, Laika." It was a struggle to obey. Fear made my bones rubbery and my muscles weak. Moonlight streamed through the window, drenching my room in celestial silver. My heart thumped so wildly that I could see my nightshirt moving. It wanted to escape. I wanted it to escape, too, because without it I would die, and when I was dead I could sail the stars with the other Laika. Alexander stirred between us. "Get out," I whispered. "All right," I whispered, because I did not know what else to say. The girl burrowed under my blanket. I watched, aghast, as she threw a bony, burnt arm across Alexander and drifted to sleep. That night, I did not sail the stars with Laika. Instead I sat awake, watching the apparition with mingled excitement and fear. The girl shifted, and, incredibly, began to shrink. Her body flattened into nothing, leaving her dress crumpled on the floor. That sank away, too, leaving the cold, empty floor in its wake. I saw it in my sleep. Her. Father roared. Her, not it. I covered Alexander's eyes and stopped at the altar. Shadows thickened and writhed against the back wall. Back in the pews, bones clattered and dried joints creaked. Something blinked in the darkness behind the altar, great, flat eyes like golden moons, shining in the cold shadows. "Oh," grandfather murmured. "Oh." "All good and well," said grandfather, "if she loves her pup. Do you love your pup, dog?" He reared up from the shadows, twisted and sinewy and utterly inhuman. "Do you love him?" Or do you feel obligated to him? I opened my mouth to answer. Instead, I burst into tears. Grandfather laughed, a low roar that shook dust from the rafters overhead. A weak bitch indeed. Our hope is in the boy, Mikhail. It was always in the boy. That is why we made him. Now go. Those great yellow eyes flicked to the pews. I do not like to tempt my sentries. Not when they are hungry as they are. Fear and disbelief battled across Father's weathered face. Do you not understand what I've told you? She creates life from thoughts. Grandfather rocketed out of the shadows, a rippling mass of glittering skin and malformed limbs, and knocked Father to the stones. Never, Grandfather snarled. Sunlight poured through the crimson windows, imbuing his strange hide with a red glow. He looked like the sky. A starry piece of outer space. Never defy me. We left. Father did not speak again until the cottage came into sight. Then he grabbed me and dragged me off the path. Listen, he growled. Listen well. I can protect you from him. And, he looked down at Alexander, eyes blazing with disgust. When the time comes, I can protect you from him, too. But only if you help me. Do you remember the story of Alexandra? Father asked. Your story is coming. Only Alexander will be me, and you will be Alexandra. My heart fell to the cold earth. I carefully pressed Alexander's head into my shoulder, shielding his face from Father. Listen, dog. When next you dream of my sister, his voice broke, he pulled away and ran his fingers through his hair. Tears shone in his eyes, which were huge and miserable over his quivering mouth. When she comes again, bring her to me. Father nodded curtly, then left. I nearly followed, but thought better of it. Instead, I stayed in the forest with Alexander. Alexander pulled ahead. After a while, I couldn't hear or see him, he drifted away, slipping into the deep shadows. That night, Alexandra came to me again, blistered flesh dripping down her face. Her eyes had melted away, leaving raw, swollen masses of flesh in her melted sockets. She turned. Father froze. She set her small hand on his cheek. Father squalled and writhed, but couldn't break away from her. Mikhail, she wept. You are just like him now. She jerked and began to shrink, to sink, disappearing into the floor. The moment her hand fell away, Father leapt to his feet and ran. After that, he did not ask to see Alexandra. This is good, because I did not see her in my dreams after that. I only saw Laika. I spent most nights drifting among the stars with that dear, doomed dog at my side. Imagined or not, the sights were glorious, incomprehensibly beautiful star formations, planets, great multicolored expanses of celestial mists. Your ability, said Grandfather, has not been seen on this earth for 1,000 years or more. No. You take the dark things of the world, the fear, the hate, the pain, and channel them into physical form. And that is just the beginning. You will be able to do anything. You will make bodies. Permanent, perfect bodies for me, and for you. Grandfather whispered, listen closely, for you will only hear this once, I was wrong. We followed the path for many miles. Our home was hours and hours from the nearest town, we wouldn't reach it until long past nightfall. I could only hope that Grandfather wouldn't notice our absence until the following day. It wasn't an unlikely hope. Grandfather spent most of his time in the chapel. The second this thought crossed my mind, a glittering dark shape leapt out of the trees and knocked Alexander from my arms. I caught a blur of twisted limbs and nightmarish hands, of great yellow eyes like flattened moons. Alexander screamed as a torrent of blood splattered across the snow. It sank quickly, melting red canyons through the pristine white. I screamed. Birds took flight and mammals ran through the undergrowth. The piercing note echoed off the mountains. The pain within it should have ended the world, but there was no one to hear and no one to care. I felt it, the crushing weight of sorrow, the almost physical sensation of my spirit tearing and bleeding out into my guts. I fell to my knees and cradled Alexander's head for hours. My father finally found us around nightfall. He had a heel of bread and an oily chicken leg. He pressed them both into my hands, then left. I tore the bread into pieces and dropped them, one by one, into Alexander's mouth. When he did not wake, I burst into tears and hurled the chicken leg into the woods. Her fear diminished, and so did her pain. So did mine. Together we sailed the stars, looking upon the earth and marveling at the incomprehensible beauty around us. I drew my knees to my chin and wept. After a while, something warm bumped my hand. A wet nose touched my palm. I knew what I would see long before I opened my eyes. Rage flowed through my blood, exquisitely corrosive. Hate, I learned then, is pleasurable, it is fury and it is the basis of power. Laika reared up and leapt, snout piercing one of grandfather's flat moon eyes. He screamed and shook his head back and forth. Laika fell to the snow, twisting, and quickly righted herself. Then she bit his foot. Her teeth sank through that impenetrable, immortal hide like butter. Laika was not large enough or strong enough to kill him, but she tore holes in him the way a match scorches holes in paper. Soon grandfather was on his knees, mere feet from Alexander's corpse. Laika came to me, panting, and collapsed in my lap. She bled from 1,000 wounds, some small, some undoubtedly mortal. Good dog. My voice broke. I stroked her gently, willing those wounds to close. I was a monster. I'd used Laika just like the others had, calling her down on false pretenses, filling her with hope, before throwing her into the void. Good girl. Good girl. I screamed as Alexander's body twitched and juddered. Then he sat up, bones creaking and frozen sinews cracking. He smiled. His eyes shone like molten gold in a forge. Laika attacked again. Alexander's face curled into a snarl as she bit and tore his skin, exhibiting an energy at odds with her awful wounds. Relief and horror engulfed me. This was the end. My mind would detach, forever this time. The fear would finally end. Laika caught and held him. Father pressed the barrel of the gun against his good eye and pulled the trigger as the sun broke over the mountains. Father stepped back. I reached for him, drunk on hope and gratitude, but he recoiled from me. In his weathered face, I saw despair and rage. No! I screamed. He pulled the trigger. Half his head evaporated, leaving a glistening mass like a fleshy geode. His body stumbled forward a step, then crumpled to the snow. It took a very long time for the sun to burn grandfather down to dirty oil. Laika held on until the last scrap of skin melted. Then she stumbled to me and collapsed. I stroked her until her body shrank and sank into the ground, leaving nothing but a scattering of tiny, dim orbs, the stars I'd seen in her fur. I touched one. It was pleasantly hot. I gathered them up and slipped them into my pocket. I went to Alexander's body, ravaged beyond description, broken in ways that did not seem entirely real, and sat with him until nightfall. Then I stood and walked away. And life went on. And I cannot tolerate fear.
Need a break? Too bad. These stories don't wait, and neither do we. Next one's worse, in the best way.
The Thing That Happened to Chris, by Emphasis 3368. Guys, come on, Alex says from behind the camera. Stop it, we have to get there before dark. Nice hole in the ground. Top 10, honestly. The static ends, and Chris and Jay's banter takes over the audio. They're jokingly shoving each other closer to the edge before more rocks fall into the quarry's shady bottom. I swear, Dana's been coming on to me all week. Jay says. Alex is filming him from behind, taking in Jay and Chris' backs as they walk. Sure she has, Chris says dryly. Just like Emily is in science. It's not my fault, all the ladies want a piece of the. White noise obscures the audio for a moment, and dancing static overtakes the TV screen. And how the? Did you hear that? Marcus asks. Hear what? Chris says. I think it was wind, dude. No, Marcus says quickly, whirling back around, it was like. Marcus's voice fades off as he goes almost unnaturally still. Marcus, what did it sound like? Jay asks. Leaves crunch as Jay walks closer, gripping Marcus's arm to turn him around. Did it sound like your mom when I? Aunt Janelle is smiling widely, holding a plate of pizza rolls. Aunt Janelle hums happily and sets the plate on the table behind me. Oh yeah, my Chris and his friends were great, best boys I knew. Her eyes go misty again as she stands, the dying light of the sun outside highlighting her graying hair. She stills for a moment, looking down. What? Marcus asks again. Yeah, you got all weird, dude, Jay says. Marcus nods, wiping at the blood from his nose like it's a second thought as he turns and resumes walking. Yeah, he says faintly, yeah. What? What? Marcus repeats. The noise. Jay yells, more leaves crunching as he runs towards Marcus. You said it sounded like something, then you got all weird. The clip's audio goes fuzzy for a moment, and the visual quickly follows. The visuals return, and the camera shakes as Alex turns around. Static overtakes Alex's words as the camera turns to Chris. He's also looking around, the flashlight in his hands flickering and sending sporadic bursts of light at trees and the ground. The audio clarity sharply returns right as Jay yells, but the view continues to shake as Alex rapidly moves. The camera spins, trees and the grayness of the woods blurring past before it abruptly stops. Stop being all weird. Guys. They separate with a sigh from Chris as he walks out of view, coming back with the flashlight that's still weakly flickering. Alex picks up the camera, staring into the lens and carefully wiping the dirt with his sleeve. Jay and Marcus are whispering over Alex's shoulder as he messes with the camcorder. The unfocused woods behind them are still static and bubbling. Jay scratches at his chin as they talk, eyes rolling as Alex's magnified eyes peer into the camera and me. Alex spins suddenly, the camera jolting as he turns to look into the woods behind him, and the view erupts into static. The movement makes me jump, and I blink rapidly, trying to calm back down. Rewinding the clip a few seconds, it looks like Alex turns to nothing, only Jay and Marcus arguing. By the time the static ends, they've resumed walking. The camera, now with shitty night vision on, is angled on Alex's feet as he walks, trudging through piles of leaves and debris. No one is talking now. Suddenly, they pause. The camera flicks up, showing Marcus looking into the trees behind them, white and green and ghostly in the night vision. Wind ruffles his hair, and Chris's flashlight highlights his face as he turns, whispering. Then. What? The camera slowly focuses again, and Chris is locking a door, the sliding glass door in the kitchen that leads into Aunt Janelle's backyard. The night vision is almost blinding in the kitchen's light, highlighting Chris' dirty knees and wide, rolling eyes. "What the fuck?" he says. "What the, how, Marcus?" Downstairs now, Jay yells, and the camera turns down again, and they stumble down the basement stairs. The door slams, and it sounds nearly like it's happening now. Like if I were to turn around, I could see my cousin and his friend sprinting down the stairs. A noise snaps me out of the trance that the video put me in. The room is dark now, darker than it seems like it should be for this time at night. The only thing giving light is the green-white glow of the night vision on the TV. Another noise from the TV ropes me back in. Marcus is nowhere to be seen. Someone gasps, someone swears, and the camera falls again. It's quickly picked up and refocused on the window. A light flicks on outside the window just as the light in the basement flicks off. It illuminated the top of the TV, then the rug, then the tips of Alex's sneakers and Chris's legs. It slowly gets brighter, then lights up like the sun, bathing everything in the video in a cold light. It's quaking as it slowly climbs the wall and hits the window. It glints off the glass, blinding the camera. Slowly turning, nothing is out of the ordinary. The room is silent. A slow exhale leaves me, and I turn back to the TV. In the window above it, a greasy, three-fingered handprint is pressed against the glass. The TV turns back on, showing a crooked view of the empty basement as a white light outside flicks on through the window.
Something's still listening, and it wants more. Next story. Just don't say its name.
Crawdads, by Fog, Person 05. My sister's husband has always been a nervous guy. He's usually the first to arrive and the first to leave at every single event, the kind you'd see glancing at every corner and peeking around every bend before he made any kind of decision. He's quiet and rarely ever starts a conversation unless it's something dire, never picks up a drink, never engages that much outside the few family gatherings we still throw. He had always been that way, at least for the several years that he has been in our lives. I raised an eyebrow at that, unsure of what to even think. "Yeah man," I replied back. "We can chat. Your place or mine?" "My place." He responded immediately. "Thank you." I sent a rain check to my buddies for the next day and immediately texted Leah to get her input. She sent back a shrugging emoji with a short message. "IDK, but he's been kinda jumpy lately, more than usual. He keeps telling me he's fine, so I'm not pushing it. Maybe he just needs some guy time." After my shift that Friday, I changed out of my work clothes and texted my brother-in-law about dinner. He offered to pay me back for picking up burgers, and so I arrived at his and Leah's suburban ranch about an hour later with a bag of fried goodies. The snow was falling softly around us, not enough to stick, but enough to keep it blisteringly cold and wet. I didn't know what to expect when I ducked my head through the weather and opened the couple's front door, but it wasn't what I saw when I did. Every single light in the house was on, from the porch lights to the foyer's coat closet to the bulbs lining the stairwell. From where I stood in the entryway I could see directly into the living room, where my brother-in-law sat nearly motionless in a leather armchair across from the TV. Some basketball game was playing, but he wasn't watching it. His eyes were directed to the corner of the room, unblinking and watery. When the front door closed behind me, those eyes darted in my direction. His smile was thin and there was no color in his face. "Hey Sean." When he burst out laughing a second later, I nearly jumped out of my skin. It was a full belly laugh, the kind you'd hear from a man at the highest point in his life. His hands gripped the edges of the armchair, digging into the leather as he rocked back and forth. I swear to God I could almost see tears forming in his eyes. I had to pull myself together before I spoke. "Marcus, I'm going to call the cops if you don't tell me what's going on." My threat wasn't genuine, and my voice cracked when I spoke, but it was enough to get him to stop laughing. He stared at his feet for a second before mumbling. "Sorry, needed to get that out. I just know you won't believe me, Sean." A twang was beginning to creep into his voice. It was more upsetting than it should have been. Marcus shook his head profusely. "That's the thing, man. I don't know if I have, or if I did." The bags under his eyes weren't a good sign. I never thought I'd tell anyone the truth, never thought I'd get to this point, certainly not after I got married, moved away. He trailed off at the end of that thought, hands still gripping the arms of the chair, face still rigid with fear. Sometimes you just don't know what the truth is, you know, what you've experienced, you know. I've never been a therapist in any sense, and my friends always said I was a terrible listener, but in that moment I felt as if I was staring down a man on the last legs of a breakdown. I could practically see the cogs in his brain fizzing and malfunctioning. The tension floating in the room was thick enough to choke on. Looking back, I probably should have called someone or at least looked up some therapy speak by then. I was so put off by his behavior that the possibility didn't even enter my head. The mystery of it all clouded my judgment. If nothing else, I thought that I was someone that could get him out of this strange funk. We were brothers after all. He had said he needed to chat, and so a chat was going to happen. "Tell me about it, man." I spoke evenly and quietly. "Whatever you need to get off your chest, I'm here for you." Marcus's eyes searched my face, and I did my best to appear neutral and understanding, even though I was completely uncomfortable. Regardless of whether or not I was successful, he took a deep breath. "I've never told anyone this story," he whispered. "I moved away from my small hometown the first chance I got a degree, I was lucky enough to meet Leah, I've got this picture-perfect life, I turned 40 this year." He chuckled darkly at the end of that list, but I did not know why. It's something I never thought I'd have to talk about ever again, but that's the thing about some nightmares, they never really end. You don't really wake up. He nodded once. "I have to tell someone, Sean. I thought that I could bury it, but I can't do that anymore." His tone was resolute, as serious as death. "I'm sorry, but I couldn't tell Leah. She's already half convinced I'm a day away from the psych ward. She's supportive, but," his entire body shivered. "You're the only other person I could think of." I bit down on my unease for a second. I had already made up my mind that Leah would be getting a call from me following this conversation, but I still nodded and gave him my own thin smile. "You didn't kill someone, did you, Marcus?" I'm not even sure if I was trying to make a joke, but the moment it passed my lips I knew it was the wrong thing to say. I nodded. "Go on." Marcus turned to the basketball game on the TV. The second half had just started, and it captured his gaze entirely as he began to speak. It was almost exactly 30 years ago. I was 10 and I lived in a trailer at the edge of a farm. My grandparents owned the farmland and they let my mother rent the trailer we lived in. She was a single mother and they never approved of her, so they gave her the dregs of what they owned while she busted her ass at the 24/7 breakfast joint down the road. I grew up running in and out of their house and being resentful that my mother wasn't around to play catch with me like Grandpa was. He shook his head, groaning at the memory. At that point in the story, I watched his bloodshot eyes begin to well. He blinked away the tears before speaking again. "I was too young. I knew how my grandfather yelled at my mother, and even my mother or grandmother would spank me in my worst moments. I would listen to Ryder and feel bad, and in the next breath we would fight and wrestle like most boys. We would end our friendship over minor things and come back together not even a week later when one of us had a new toy or something we'd recovered in the lost and found bin at school. Sometimes Jed would hang out with us, but I remember that he was whiny and he cried a lot. Ryder was always in a bad mood when he was there. Lily was a toddler, and I never really saw her. It was during those days we would spend most of our time hunting crawdads. I think up north they're just called crawfish or crayfish, can't remember. They're little crustaceans, and they're mainly out during summer when the creek water is warm. They're nocturnal, but if you knew where to look for them, and we did, you could poke some out during the day or early evening. Ryder and I were avid crawdad hunters, picking them from their hiding places to throw in a bucket for one of my grandma's legendary crawfish boils, ones that she would hold for the seasonal guys each summer. I was 10, like I said. I remember that my mother and I spent half of my school's fall break at a local hotel just to get away. She had saved enough money to treat me to a decent dinner and some time to ourselves. When we returned, Grandma and Grandpa let us stay in the main house without so much as a word. I was stunned, but it felt like my vacation had extended. They bought me whatever I wanted for dinner and let me run around the house. We played games and watched movies late into the night. I thought a switch had flipped. It was only a few days after I returned to school that I realized Ryder hadn't shown up with the rest of us. I was drinking apple juice next to Grandma and Grandpa at the kitchen table while we played cards on December 26th of that year. There was a call on the landline that my mother answered. I remember hearing a woman sobbing on the other end, her voice filled with so much anguish that it made every hair on my body stand up. My grandparents took us into the living room to finish our game, but I will never forget the sound of her voice, the sheer horror in her cries, the tears on my own mother's face when she joined us. I didn't ask her what that was. I never asked her. It was entirely incidental in my mind, I just thought it was strange. Stop. The bitterness in that one word stopped me dead in my tracks. I said, "You have to let me finish. Don't talk." My question vanished on the spot. I couldn't even remember what I was about to ask. I only gave him a short nod to continue. January became February and I had nearly put the whole ordeal on the back burner of my mind. Down in Ewing, we never got real winter, not like we do here, but that year gave us a miracle frost that nobody had seen in the county for at least a decade. The creek bed was frozen and the trees were dotted with ice for a good part of those months. I was thankful that our trailer finally wasn't boiling hot, but it wasn't very helpful for playing outside. Grandma took advantage of my days off school to get some help with chores in the main house. I was bored out of my mind. I remember that I wished something would happen. The night it all happened, I was lying awake in the trailer on the bottom bunk. Mom was working a night shift at the diner. Grandma and Grandpa were asleep in the main house. I was wearing Mario pajama pants and an old elementary school t-shirt. I was having trouble sleeping and I didn't know why. I had barely begun to doze off when I heard a knock. My eyes opened immediately. It was a hesitant kind of knock, and one I didn't recognize. Mom had a loud knock whenever she forgot her keys in the trailer. Grandpa and Grandma's knocks were sudden and short. I sat up in bed and looked towards the front door. "Mama?" I called out, but nobody replied. Blinking in the darkness of the trailer, I felt my body grow cold as I saw the outline of Ryder's face against the glass. One hand was pressed palm forward on the window, and the other appeared behind his back. The window was low enough, but he still appeared to be stretching to reach its height, standing on his tiptoes in the cold grass. I blinked several more times, convinced that he was just an illusion. "Ryder?" I was happy to see him, but I was also confused and annoyed. "Where have you been?" I asked, jumping up from the bunk and almost smacking my forehead on the wooden frame. You moved away and didn't even tell me you were going. I pressed my face up against the interior side of the glass, until I could see him eye to eye. He looked the same as ever from where I stood. Coulda called. I grumbled. Landline works just fine. That memory made me snort. Yeah. So are you coming out or what? He pressed his other palm to the window, bouncing up and down as if he were still straining to stand tall. The creek ain't frozen anymore, and the crawdads are out. I miss your grandma's stew. Ryder got a pained look on his face, but it was more irritation than anything else. You keep asking these dumb questions. Mama hates driving. I walked here same as I always do. You didn't move far, then. I was tired, I had missed my friend, and the idea of splashing around the creek that late was pretty tempting. Mama would never let us wander away from Grandpa's property when it was this dark, but I figured the crawdads would probably be swarming. Okay, I finally told Ryder. But I'm gonna put my coat and boots on first, and you gotta tell me where you've been. ///// End of part 1 // Didn't realize these things had a character limit, but I'll make a second post with the rest of that transcribed story soon. PT2.
Whew, telling gave me chills. But hey, we're just getting started. The next one's sharper. You'll see.
Oh, thank you. They definitely are, I use them every day on the job. Where's that at? Yes, sir. It's going to be one of the biggest in the city. So it seems. I used to do construction too, you know. That was way back in the day. I started back when your mama was probably a toddler. Oh, yeah. With a company, or freelance, or... Did you like it? Perks. He smiled. Can you keep a secret, boy? Yeah. My neighbors and I used to do that when I was a kid. My house was one of the first built in our neighborhood, then the rest came later. We probably explored every house on the block before they were finished, when they were just wood skeletons, maybe breaking a couple bottles too, to tell you the truth. Of course you did. Who wouldn't, given the opportunity? But that's all the childish stuff. The real perks came later in life, when I was an adult. Well then you take her there. You and her all alone in a skeleton of a home, as you said. Well, you don't just take a girlie down to a construction site at night just to get your diddly fiddled with. You take her for, you know. The bus rolled to a stop. The only thing running through my mind was a memory. I was a kid, no older than 6. My friends and I were playing hide and seek. I hid in the crawl space under my front porch, and when I was hiding, I found a pair of boots half buried in the dirt.
And now, as the hour gets cold, and the shadows stretch long into the corners of your room, it's time.
Yeah. Chew the spooky violin. But seriously, this next one? Even I didn't sleep after hearing it.
I've claimed something coming from you.
What? Just because I sleep in a coffin and collect cursed dolls?
Among other things. This is the final descent for the night. One last story, dragged up from the depths of the disturbed and deranged.
Go ahead. Turn off the lights. We dare you.
This is HorrorSlop.
Last time. I sat silent for a moment in shock that my plan had even worked. It seemed almost too simple, too easy. But here he was. That's a lovely little patch you've planted. I can look after it if you like, I used to maintain the last garden here," he said, breaking the silence that had followed since his initial words. "I know who you are. We need you," was all I could manage. The mental exhaustion and fatigue from the whole experience had built up, but his arrival was like finishing a bad day working at school. I felt like I could relax again, even if only a little. "What's your name, darling?" he asked. "It's Kat. I live in flat 42 now." His face lit up as I confirmed my flat number. "She's gone. But the whole place is a mess, so many things are happening and the residents are suffering," I answered. I explained my whole experience since moving in. I told him about Jamie and I sobbed. Derek held me as I cried and made me feel safe, something I had forgotten the feeling of since receiving Prue's note. He didn't interrupt, he just listened. Derek listened to my entire tale with barely a word. When I finished, he stood up and asked me to follow him. I was confused, but I did as I was told. "I can't. Please don't make me," I begged. I stepped inside the lift. Derek stepped in behind me, placing a comforting hand on my shoulder as I hyperventilated. He gently turned me to face the panel of buttons that control where the lift stops. I studied the panel. Read all the numbers, counting them. I couldn't see anything wrong. I tried. I really tried, but nothing seemed out of place at all. Everything you expected to find was there and nothing more. I shook my head, barely regaining my composure. "Can you take us to floor 9, please?" He smiled slightly as he made the request. I looked back to the panel to press the button, but floor 9 didn't exist. I was so confused. I had counted the numbers, I was sure of it. Derek must have made it disappear. But the panel didn't look any different to before. I can't explain it. Looking at it, I would have sworn blind nothing was wrong with it even once I knew, but floor 9 didn't exist. Derek could see my frustration. It was like the building was now playing tricks on me. The building is like a living organism. It can seal off parts of the world, and it can open up others you never could have imagined. When those awful people burned that whole floor of residence, I was devastated. Some wonderful people lived in those flats, both of the usual and unusual variety. But those people had no limit to their cruelty. Whole families burned alive. It was a tragedy that made me so angry. At this point I noticed one of the hairless cats had sat between us. Derek looked at it with tears brimming in his eyes. He stroked it and it moved on to his lap. Derek's fingers didn't burn at all. He continued. When it happened, the building used its defense mechanisms and sealed off the entirety of the floor. It stopped the fire from spreading and kept the perpetrators there, to die by their own hands. The building only allowed the floor to be unsealed once they were dead. It took about a week before those awful people turned up again. Asking for sugar at people's doors, the first few let them in. It was so difficult, so many residents burned alive that I was having to use their remains for my garden just to hide the dead. The entire community were terrified and grieving for those that died. No matter how hard I tried, I still couldn't predict them, or see them, so I took Prudence, who at the time seemed a perfectly reasonable woman, to the burned-out floor. I stared at him in amazement through the whole story. I was exhausted, but my brain was working in overdrive to process what he was telling me. I had started to stroke the cat too. My fingers did burn, but I didn't flinch. I found its company comforting. He carried on. I brought Prudence to the floor within the hour. The stairs had stopped skipping floor 9 for me, although I later learned that when Prudence had tried alone she was not allowed access. We explored the floor, walking amongst the remnants of our dead friends' belongings. Eventually, we came across one of the soulless arsonists, roaming the halls. It appears that's where they spend their time when they aren't out terrorizing the residents trying to claim more victims. Prudence lit up. She grabbed hold of one that had tried to kill her friend, Molly. She remembered the flat number she had claimed to be from and repeated my actions, with a lot more sweating and some winces of pain. It worked again. This left me not at my best. My intuition was failing me when a few months after that, I allowed Prudence and Molly to herd the creatures from the lift to floor 9. It's one of my biggest regrets. I should never have walked them up there. But I didn't know she was going to burn them all. She didn't give me a chance to reason. I went to sleep that night with my mind reeling. I wondered where Derek slept and if he even needed to. Derek was climbing the stairs at around 11 a.m. I had already been there for 3 hours, but it had been worth it. He looked particularly unimpressed to see me. His face still looked kind though, even with the sour expression. You have to promise to stay back. If you get your girl approaches, you can do what you need to do, but you have to stay back. He pleaded. As we pushed through the door, it was like entering an entirely new world. Everything was black. Burned to carbon. You could smell nothing but charcoal. Literally nothing but empty shells of homes and flakes of what used to be sentimental objects remained. It was devastating to witness. Derek grabbed my arm and pulled me next to him, making sure to keep a tight hold of my arm. I'm not that stupid. I saw what happened to them. She gestured over her shoulder to what must have been flat number 66, where a man laid on the floor, breathing but looking broken. Just existing in that room. Prudence had been creative with the truth yet again. She didn't kill them. You can't kill them. What had Georgia said? I racked my brains as I felt the skin on my face start to sting. I imagined her melting away. It was happening to me. I was next. I pushed hard. There was nothing but anger in her eyes. She pushed my face hard with her hand as I got her to cross the boundary into flat 71. I felt my skin sizzle and blister. My whole face was in agony, but I didn't stop pushing. Watching Natalia try to fight her way out of a door that didn't exist was both satisfying and humorous. The others had started to approach at the sound of the commotion. I lingered, hoping to watch her suffer, but Derek shot me one look and I knew. It was time to go. I ran out the corridor and back into the stairwell. I stopped for longer than I probably should have. But I knew I might not get to see that 9 again, and it would be worth it. I waited for Derek on floor 9's stairwell. I couldn't help but imagine the cultists burning to death the first time around. I could hear angry screams faintly from inside the corridor. They made me worry about Derek, but I knew that really I didn't need to. It took a while, but he eventually left the corridor and joined me in the stairwell. He didn't say anything, he just looked at me and the 3rd-degree burns across my face. He didn't need to speak. I knew he'd fix the problem. I didn't see him, instead I saw Prudence. Hacking at my tiny planted patch with shears. How it ends.
And there you have it, dear listeners. One final scream, echoing into the void.
Yeah. Void screams, eternal darkness, I did it. Can I eat now?
We're still on air, Roxy.
Oh no, just the spooky FCC is gonna haunt us for breaking the mood.
If you enjoyed tonight's descent into depravity, don't forget to like, subscribe, and what does he always say?
Stab that bell icon like it's your ex possessed by a demon, and leave a comment telling us what story made you question. I have choices.
And if you survive the night, we'll be waiting.
Same dat time, same that crypt.
You're the reason we have complaints, you know that.
You're welcome.